Hello friends, this is Otz for tax reasons, and today we're going to be talking about every single survivor perk. We will start with the strongest one, which we'll spend a little bit more time on, and then slowly get into the lesser used, not as popular, not as good ones. Spending less time on them, but still talking about why they are good or how exactly they can be used in niche scenarios. If you only watch a little bit of this video, you will still have a very solid idea of what the meta for survivor is. If you watch all of it, you should be quite prepared for anything. Needless to say, this video is most useful for survivor players that need to run these perks in order to have a better chance, but it is also useful for killer players to watch because that way you can be ready and know what to expect, especially if you've taken a break from the game or if you're a bit of a beginner. Now, let's put the perks on screen. We will have the description on that side, and as you see, we'll go through every single perk. And I think we're ready to start with arguably the strongest survivor perk in the game, Decisive Strike. It is no secret that the strongest strategy for killer is to tunnel a single survivor out. By tunneling, we mean that you focus on one survivor, hook them, wait until they're unhooked, hook them, then hook them again, get them out of the game. Decisive Strike is the most unavoidable obstacle that a killer that's trying to tunnel will face. It is mostly unavoidable, except for maybe Pyramid Head and other killers that have a few gimmicks here and there. Maybe if you have a Mori for the second hook, but it is mostly an unavoidable thing. And even in those scenarios, survivors can always go into a locker and force you to eat the Decisive Strike. This will stun the killer for a few seconds, can only be used once, but what makes Decisive Strike so strong, not only does it obviously stop a tunneling killer, it also has great synergies with other perks. So you can use the next perk that we'll talk about off the record to tank to hit and then use Decisive. Because Decisive will free you from deep wound, you can then use Dead Hard afterwards. It also pairs really well with Lithe or other exhaustion perks like even Smash Hit, so that you can Decisive Strike and then drop a pallet on a killer or use a pallet or a window to make a lot of distance. It's simply the most momentum killing perk for a killer that is trying to play optimally. If you run this perk and the killer doesn't tunnel, the perk is wasted, yes, but if the killer doesn't tunnel, that means you have a really good chance to get back on gens, and the game might not go so well for them. One really nice thing about this perk is that it cannot be played around with things that cause deep wound, as some other anti-tunneling perks that we'll see later can be. So if the killer has some add-on to apply deep wound, and there's a few killers that can do that, Decisive Strike will still work. It's a very difficult to avoid perk, has great synergies with other things, and it's basically your plan A if the killer does tunnel. If the killer doesn't tunnel, there are other perks that will help us as well, and we'll get to them in a minute. But next up is another anti-tunneling perk called Off the Record. Off the Record is it's just arguably also maybe the strongest perk in the game. It is an incredibly powerful perk that does the effects of like two perks together. There's basically two effects running parallel with this perk. One of them can be active and deactivate. The other one will always be active. It works twice on your first unhook and your second unhook. So unlike Decisive Strike, you can benefit from this perk twice, and it will basically give you 80 seconds of borrowed time of deep wound effect if you get hit, aka Endurance. This is an unbelievably strong effect. Being able to have 80 seconds of Endurance means that if the killer takes a long time to hit you and tries to tunnel you sloppily, they will suffer a lot. You can also, and this happens quite often, take a hit for someone else. Say that you become unhooked and someone else is there on hook. Even though you are vulnerable and you just got unhooked, you can now go and take a hit for someone else if it makes sense to do so. So yeah, being able to tank an extra hit in many scenarios with this perk is unbelievably helpful. The only downside, of course, is that if you get hit immediately right after being unhooked, or if the killer procs deep wound on you, you cannot use it anymore. But even in those scenarios, or if you touch a generator or do some other conspicuous action, obviously it doesn't work. And just like Decisive Strike earlier, it doesn't work in the endgame. But the other thing that this perk does is it makes you completely silent, completely silent. This means that even if the killer has some perk to make you louder, like Strider, you will still be 100% quiet, and you do not show up to auto reading. This is super useful. This means that if the killer isn't tunneling you, you can go into a corner of the map, start self-caring, start using a medkit, start healing with some other perk, and you will not be victim to the killer seeing you with some other random auto reading effect from an add-on or from a perk. If you play against a spirit that's trying to tunnel you, well, now she cannot use your injured sounds to track you as well. This can also double as a bit of a weakness. Sometimes if a killer notices that you make no sound, they will assume that this perk is in play and try to play around it. But still, off the record, it's just an amazing perk. One of the most cruel things that you can do with this perk is give it to multiple people. And then if the killer has hooked one survivor, take hits for each other. And for some killers, that can be really, really annoying. Just the absolute amount of effects packed into one perk and the sheer length just makes this perk really, really, really strong. Now, as I said earlier, if you're being tunneled, your plan A is Decisive of Off the Record. But if you're not being tunneled, Resurgence has really climbed up the tier list as an incredibly strong plan B to get back into action. Resurgence will make it so that when you become unhooked, you will already start heal at the 70% progress mark. This means that if a survivor is there, they can heal you in very, 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 very little time. Similar to Will Make It, but obviously only applying to you. And that would already be a really good effect. But the best thing about Resurgence is just how effective it makes self-healing, especially with a medkit. So again, as we said, if you're being tunneled, you obviously have Decisive, right? Or Off the Record. And if you're not being tunneled with Resurgence and a simple medkit, you can heal yourself in seconds. Especially if you bring a medkit with skill check add-ons, which are very common right now, and they're very easy to come by. They're not rare items. You can start healing yourself, hit one single skill check, and you're already healed. This means that you can heal yourself in 2 or 3 seconds. It's really hard to explain just how incredible this is, right? In a normal scenario where a survivor unhooks you and then heals you, they will need about 16 seconds, let's round it down to 15 seconds, assuming that they hit a skill check or two, to heal you. So 15 seconds from two survivors is a 30-second investment in total. Meanwhile, if you have the perk Resurgence and a simple medkit, you can heal yourself in just 3 or 4 seconds from only one survivor. That is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Not to mention that if you have some kind of build to unhook yourself, some of which can be really powerful, such as Wicked and stuff that we'll get into, you can also unhook yourself. And if you're not broken from Deliverance, you can heal yourself with Resurgence, which is really, really powerful as well. This insane boost in sheer efficiency, spending so little time healing yourself, really does make it very attractive for teams never to bother healing, just sit on gens, and whenever they go on the hook, then they use this afterwards. It is really, really powerful. It is an incredibly strong plan B, and it makes common medkits extremely powerful as well. So for that reason, I think it's really, really high up here, although some people could argue against it. Next up is Unbreakable. Unbreakable has always been at the top of any of my tier lists on Survivor. Even though it's not a perk you see all the time, its presence is very, very felt in the gameplay. What this perk does is provide a passive deterrence even when it's not there. The fact that a person with Unbreakable can pick themselves up in 24 or so seconds without anyone's help makes it so that killers are way more likely to be afraid of slugging. In a lot of scenarios, if this perk never existed, killers would down one survivor, down another survivor, and just leave them on the ground because it generates so much pressure without wasting the time of picking them up. Right? If everyone is on the ground, well, and no one can pick themselves up, the game is over, no matter how many hooks, no matter how many gens are left. But with Unbreakable, the ability to heal yourself from the ground faster, which never goes away, by the way. You can pick yourself up once, but the ability to heal yourself faster is always there. This removes a lot of the pressure that survivors can be put under by the killer. And the fact that a person with Unbreakable can 99 their recovery instead of the usual 95 before another survivor has to pick you up also allows you to do certain plays under pallets and other things like that. It pairs also very well with Decisive Strike. One common, you could argue, counterplay to perks like Decisive Strike would be to leave a survivor on the ground for a little bit, but with Unbreakable, that becomes really risky. And yeah, basically, it's another form of insurance for survivors to make sure that no matter what they do, no matter how much risk they put themselves into, the killer will always have to second guess themselves. Some of the toughest teams that you'll go against will probably have a couple Unbreakables, knowing just how good this perk is. Even though I understand for the average survivor, this perk might not be that appealing. You might not want to run it. Once you have a team going and you know how to not overextend yourself, you will find utility in this perk. I'm very, very sure of it. Next up is Deliverance. This is another perk that is also not extremely common, but that holds immense power. The ability to unhook yourself is something that is simply very strong, because it basically creates a fifth survivor. Normally, you would be in a situation where one survivor's being chased, one survivor's on a gen, one survivor's on a hook, one survivor has to go for the survivor on the hook, but then the killer rotates and interrupts the survivor that's coming for the rescue, and now the guy that's on the gen has to let go and come for the rescue, and no one's doing anything. Meanwhile, with Deliverance, everyone's on gens, everyone can hide, killer might not find anyone, and then the survivor unhooks themselves. And once you unhook yourself, you can have access to Unbreakable, to Decisive, to Off the Record, all those other perks that we mentioned to make yourself very difficult to catch. Deliverance basically punishes the killer for hooking multiple survivors and encourages survivors to do what they're already doing. The only downside of this perk, of course, is that if you run it and you get chased first, you lose the value, but you could always have a team with a couple of them so that at least one Deliverance will almost always be in play. Very strong perk. It also used to have a secondary effect that does no longer work. One thing that was absolutely insane about Deliverance is that it would not give a stack to certain killer perks like Devour Hope or Floods of Rage. These perks only work when a survivor gets unhooked. And this, if the killer had Devour Hope and you use Deliverance, you wouldn't give him stacks. This has been changed and it's not been in the patch notes. So one thing you need to know, this perk doesn't do that anymore. So that's a small undocumented nerf. But still, the ability to unhook yourself, even in the end game, is wild. You can go for someone else, get them off a really tough position, let your teammates heal each other, be ready to take hooks, and then unhook yourself without the killer being able to do much about it. You also get, of course, the typical 10 seconds of endurance when you unhook yourself. A very strong effect. Now, in contrast to what we've been seeing, we now move to perks that are actually very popular, and none more popular than Windows of Opportunity. This perk consistently ranks as the #1 most used perk in both official and unofficial data, and it's for a very good reason. In some ways, you could very well argue that this is the most useful perk in the entire game for the average survivor. Windows Opportunity shows you the points of safety around you, and this means that newer players play like intermediates, intermediate players play like advanced players, and advanced players are way more consistent. It also really helps you when you play with solo teammates and you don't know exactly what resources they've used up. Without this perk, you will sometimes have to go to Shack and turn the corner and then see that there's no pallet there, and you're like, oh, well, I assume there was a pallet here, now I'm gonna die. With this perk, you will know where the pallets have been, whether they are dropped, whether they are gone, whether they're not there at all, and maybe the spawn is now elsewhere. So with all of that information quickly accessible means that you can always improvise and never run into a dead zone, at least knowingly. So yeah, Windows of Opportunity is just an incredible perk. It's really useful. Some people think that if you run this perk, this will be a crutch. And I don't think it's the case. I think a lot of really good survivors that already have great understanding of the game still run this perk and it works out fine for them. It's not an excuse not to learn the maps. Even if you do run Windows, you should still study the maps and watch resources that explain them and so on and so forth. So please don't let this perk do the hard work for you. But it's still really useful, and I don't think you should shy away from using it. Now, one thing I will say, one of the reasons why this perk is not on the 5 stars top is because this perk on its own doesn't really do all that much. It doesn't create new pallets. It doesn't make you vault faster. If you go against 4 survivors with Windows Opportunity and you're a strong killer and the survivors are already good, it's not that horribly impactful. Not to mention that in a few maps, the pallets are almost 100% fixed. So in some maps, there will always be a pallet here, always be a pallet there, always be a pallet there. So the utility of Windows isn't that insane in those scenarios. Still, really solid perk, however. The next perk, Déjà Vu, is also quite popular, but honestly, I wish it was even more popular. Déjà Vu highlights the 3 closest gens to each other and also gives you a little bit of a boost of speed, which is always welcome when working on them. When there's only 3 gens left in the game, that means that all of the gens will be highlighted, and no matter which one you work on, you will get a speed boost. Now, the speed boost is nice, but the information is really what really makes this perk shine. For beginner players that don't know the maps very well, that don't know where to check, which rooms can have gens, which buildings can have gens, this perk is unbelievably useful. And let me be honest, for even advanced players, this perk is still really useful in certain maps. We've all gone to maps like Midwich or Larry's, especially Midwich, which doesn't have any indication where gens are. And we go to a room that 90% of the time has a generator, and there's no generator. And then we go to the next room, which normally has a generator, and the generator there has already been completed. And we go to the next room, which has a generator, oh, but the killer is there. So we've been spending minutes looking for progress and nothing gets done. Or maybe we have a 3-gen, but we don't know where the 3rd generator is and we can't pressure the game properly. This perk makes people so absolutely efficient on gens. It makes even clueless survivors so good at constantly pressuring gens. I genuinely do believe it that if every survivor ran this perk, games would get immediately harder. So yeah, good for anyone of any level, but particularly intermediates and beginners. Very, very, very strong perk. The more advanced players will also benefit, of course, from breaking the 3-gen. Keep in mind that if you keep doing the gens that are highlighted by Déjà Vu, if you do the 3 gens that are the closest, then the next 3 gens are gonna be further and further and further and further, resulting in an end game where the killer has gens that are across the map that are not easy to defend, and one of them will get done, and then it's the end game. So yeah, very, very good stuff. Next up is Wicked. Wicked is possibly the most underrated perk so far. You rarely see this perk, and it is unbelievably powerful. Wicked is pretty much a Deliverance with no prerequisite, doesn't need to be activated, and also has the secondary effect of seeing the killer's aura for 20 seconds upon being unhooked, which is insanely long, can be even longer with a certain perk attached, and it doesn't break you. But it only works in the basement. Now, obviously, some killers going into basement, such as Trickster, Cannibal, you might not want to do that on purpose, but this perk is an unbelievably good insurance if you go into basement or if someone else goes into it. Say, for example, that your clueless teammate has gotten themselves hooked against a really tough killer. Well, you can go into basement, rescue them, and you'll be fine by yourself. But what makes this perk really powerful on its own is the ability to force the killer into lose-lose situations. If you have a team that has several Wicked users, there will always be one basement in the game, obviously. So what they might end up doing is take one hit, go into basement, and just go into a locker. And at that point, you cannot slug them, right? You'll have to pick them out of the locker. And then you will have the choice of like, well, do I hook here? You probably will have to hook there. If you hook elsewhere, they might actually sabo, or you might not make it to another hook, or it might take you so much time that it's really not worth it. And when you hook there, they will unhook themselves, and they can have perks to make it extremely inefficient for you to even try to chase them. So they can put you in a really awful lose-lose situation. It also works during the end game, which means that one of the best strategies that you could do during the end game, which is like, okay, I only have 0 kills, I only have 1 survivor in basement, I can at least defend basement, this can turn it around. So the fact that this can turn one of the most dangerous places for survivors into a safe haven, I think makes it really strong in general, but even more so when you have a team that really leans into the strategy. And we'll see many perks that are also not super good in general or not super popular in general, but that can be really dangerous when used by a team. So yeah, try Wicked, even if nothing else, even if you end up not going to basement at all, even if the map glitches and there's no basement or something, the 20 seconds of seeing the killer's aura is still a really nice secondary effect that you will always benefit from as long as you become unhooked. So yeah, really good stuff. Next up, we go Lithe, and after that, we're gonna see some other exhaustion perks. It's a little bit hard to rate them. They all have ups and downs, but Lithe is probably the most universally well-balanced exhaustion perk, and it's useful for everyone. It's easy to use for beginners, though be careful. Sometimes beginners use this perk a bit weird. They drop a pallet, they immediately vault it. Like, don't use this perk with a brain. Don't have the so-called Lithe brain, right? It's also really useful for advanced players, and intermediate players can use it just fine. One extremely nice thing about Lithe is that it can be used in any map. Even if there's not a lot of windows, you can always use it on drop pallets, and it also pairs very well with some of the other best perks in the game, such as Decisive Strike. With Decisive Strike, you can go down strategically next to a drop pallet or a window, and then immediately use Lithe to at least make sure that you make a lot of distance. Even if you're playing against a Blight or a Nurse, killers that would normally catch up really quickly, you can use Decisive Lithe to prevent a tunnel and delay it as much as humanly possible. So overall, very solid exhaustion perk. Now, Sprint Burst is arguably the simplest and first exhaustion perk that most people will use. It does have more flexibility than Lithe, being able to be used anywhere, but also encourages you to sometimes walk and sometimes not waste it. And because you have to manage it, it can sometimes slow you down and not always be the most ideal perk for a beginner that doesn't know how to use it. If you do know how to use it though, this perk is incredible. It allows you to work on gens in the open, and then if a killer shows up out of nowhere, you still make it to safety. It allows you to bait people into chasing you for a little bit and then have it 99 and then immediately use it. People that use sprint burst really well are annoying as hell to chase. They are very, very nasty. Not to mention that you can still use a ready sprint burst to come from a very far distance for a pallet save or a flashlight save, or a cheeky little body block that the killer's not expecting. So yeah, even though it does require you to manage it a little bit, and it can be a bit of a noob trap if not used correctly, the sheer versatility of sprint burst is very, very nice, and it helps quite a bit against insta-down killers. Not so much against killers that can kind of like chase you down. If you go against an Oni with their power, if you play against a Blight and you just sprint burst in the open, you will still get caught. Survivors are fast, yes, with sprint burst, but some killers are even faster. So do be a little bit careful. The next perk is quite the opposite of sprint burst. Death Heart is an exhaustion perk that is not typically the first one people will get. It's much harder to use. It has multiple conditions. You need to be injured. You need to be unhooked. You cannot be exhausted, obviously. And you need to time the press really, really well. Now, Death Heart is really good for many, many reasons. Let's go through some of the more common ones, right? It's really good against killers that are typically considered S tier or very, very strong. Killers like Blight or Nurse. They are very, very fast, but they also hit you at predictable times, right? Nurse teleports on top of you and then has a small window to hit you. Blight rushes at you and has a small window to hit you. So if you predict when this will happen and you get a bit good at using Death Heart, you can use it very, very effectively against these really strong killers. If you play against weaker killers, Death Heart is a little bit less consistent, because they play a bit different, but also is surprisingly useful against certain killers that have predictable attacks. Against a Wesker, you can literally react to his attack and make it basically unavoidable. Against a Nemesis or a Knight, you could even Death Heart into their zombies or into their guards to get a speed boost and put yourself outside of a situation where you would otherwise be cornered. And honestly, the better the player, the more useful and creative Death Heart gets. And that's something that if you watch good survivors, you'll see in which ways they can use Death Heart. From time to time, I will find a survivor, they will do something stupid, I will think I have the upper hand, I'll hit them, and I'll eat a Death Heart. So even with a lot of experience, every now and then, I still get caught up by this perk. And it's also a very solid anti-tunneling perk to be paired with Decisive Strike. And it allows you to play very aggressive, right? You can be injured, you can be doing a gen right after being unhooked, and still have one small layer of security with Death Heart or safety in case the killer turns their attention back to you. Now, Kindred is another information perk that is honestly just amazing. It honestly does the effects of two perks at once. The first one is that the person on the hook will show the killer's aura around them to other people, but these other people will also see each other. And if you're not the person on the hook, you get a similar effect as well. So this is incredible. This is incredible. Basically, if you're on the hook, your teammates see each other. And if you're not on the hook, you see your teammates. And if the killer's nearby, you're going to see them too. Now, killers typically will not stay nearby the hook very often because we have anti-camping measures, right? But it's still really, really useful and can be enhanced with open-handed so you can see the killer from really, really far away. Kindred is basically your best friend as a solo player. It will tell you, okay, I am the closest person, I need to go for the rescue. This is really, really good. Or no, this person's going for the rescue, I shouldn't bother. It's an amazing perk. The only downside of Kindred generally is the fact that it will sometimes make you depressed by seeing your teammates and noticing that they are not doing the right thing and they are playing badly. So yeah, sometimes Kindred can reveal unfortunate team mechanics. But other than that, an amazing info perk. It becomes less useful for teams that are already on full communication, but for almost anyone else, and even for teams, it is a fairly useful perk. Quick Gambit has been updated for the upcoming 8.30 patch, and it went from one of the worst perks in the game to arguably one of the best perks in the game. The first effect is that anytime you get chased, you see the aura of your teammates. This is amazing for two reasons. At the start of the game, you want to avoid your teammates. So if you see your teammates on the right, and you're being chased, you will take the killer to the left. And if you can, you will die in the furthest possible corner so that by the time the killer has downed you, picked you up, hooked you, walked away, the gens are as far as possible from them. So that's amazing. If you are in danger, however, the script flips a little bit. If you are dead on hook and your teammates are all healthy, one of the worst feelings in the world is trying to find them to get some help and never being able to. With Quick Gambit, that part of the equation is solved. If you are in danger of being tunneled off or you're very vulnerable, you can use this perk to find your teammates and help them help you. So that's awesome. Also, if your chases are long, every time you're being chased, there will be a small increase, nothing super big, but a small increase of 5% to the generator repair speed of everyone. Mind you, this stacks with everything. So if they have Déjà Vu, a toolbox, Quick Gambit being applied, all of it stacks together. And that's pretty damn mean. It's pretty damn mean. If you manage to pop a gen 10 or 15 seconds before it normally would have, that will often prevent it from being hit by Pain Res or by Pop Goes the Weasel. So doing gens even a little bit faster is already very, very useful. So for that reason, this perk is awesome. The only downside, of course, is the small cooldown that it has when you get injured. But overall, an incredibly, incredibly solid all-around info perk. Bond, another info perk that shows you the autos of your teammates from 36 meters, which is a very, very generous. This works very similar to Kindred. With Bond, you will be able to see your teammates pretty much across the map. And if you don't see them within Bond, you will at least assume that they are in a particular gen far away. Basically, between the information from Bond and the HUD elements, you can figure out where your teammates are at any given moment, even when no one's on the hook. So this works a bit more preemptively. It also can be used similarly to the perk that we just talked about, to find people to help you, or find people that you need to help, or find people that you need to heal, or find people that you want to heal you. So Bond is like, it just lets you know, okay, this person's here, I need to avoid them. This person's here, I need them for whatever I need right now. So it's really, really awesome information. Even in Survivor Fence, you will see that seeing the exact aura of your friends is still quite useful, especially when it comes to flashlight saves and so on. There are some other perks that are very comparable, but still, Bond is just very, very nice. The only unfortunate part about Bond is that your teammates don't benefit from it. So you might see what your teammates are doing. You might go to that Michaela that is needing healing, and she might run away from you because she has no idea where you are. So that could be a bit frustrating, but it is still a really, really solid perk. Adrenaline. Probably the strongest perk in the game some time ago. It's now a little bit less impactful, but still an incredible perk. This perk used to wake you up against ready. It used to work when you came out of a hook. It was really, really strong. Watch some previous tier lists if you want to understand why. But the thing about Adrenaline now is that it does not speed you up for as long. It does not work out of a hook. Basically, if you're not on a hook, Adrenaline will either pick you up from the ground or heal you to full and give you a speed boost. That's still an amazing thing, by the way. Adrenaline is still an incredible, incredible perk. The major threat of Adrenaline is having multiple of them. And what that means basically is that survivors don't need to heal in the second half of the game unless they are about to die. So what you will notice if you have a team with Adrenaline is that you hook. There's only one gen left. This would be the point where survivors would start to get a bit scared of like, ooh, are we going to get slugged on the ground? Is the killer going to, slowly build up a snowball and then down all of us back to back? But with Adrenaline, they don't worry about that. They sit on a gen, they power through it. If a survivor is healthy and they have Adrenaline, they go and body block for the killer, take one hit, and then bam, get Adrenaline. Everyone's healthy. The speed that you make with the distance that you make with the speed from Adrenaline allows you to hold the chase for a few seconds longer, exit gates get open, and what could have been 3 kills is now 1 or none. So still a very, very strong effect, but unfortunately you cannot assume that everyone will have it. It doesn't work off hooks anymore, and it's not quite as powerful. With perks like Resurgence being able to heal you so fast, the heals right now are feeling a little bit faster because of that, so Adrenaline doesn't feel quite as necessary. Still a strong perk, but one that definitely works better once you have a team that all are on the same mindset. Reassurance is a perk that hasn't changed, but that has dropped very much in utility. With Reassurance, you can go to a nearby hook. As long as it's not in the basement. In the basement, it's a bit complicated, but as long as it's not in the basement, you will typically be able to get close enough and then press the F button, and then that person will be on the hook for 30 seconds longer. You can do this to multiple people, and multiple people can do it to a single person on the hook multiple times. So assuming that you have a couple reassurances per team, which is not a bad idea, that means that any survivor can be on the hook basically for 100 seconds per hook stage. That is wild. That is unbelievable. You might remember that the hook stages were 60 seconds and now have been buffed to be 70 seconds. So because of that, that does make Reassurance a little bit less necessary. Before Reassurance, many times myself and other killer mains will injure a lot of survivors and then camp the last few seconds of a hook stage. With Reassurance and with the 70 seconds, doing this is just impossible. Survivors are on the hook for way too long, and 100 seconds is more than a gen. If someone is dead on hook and you go there and you reassure them on the hook, you can then go back and do a gen from 0 to 100, and the killer cannot possibly wait it out. It also works in the end game in situations where you need a bit more time and you need to buy time for someone that's there when there's no anti-camp and there's no other perks. So yeah, Reassurance is an incredibly good perk. Do not run this as a solo player. It's just a bit too risky, I think. But as a team, having 1 or 2 Reassurances is unbelievably good. Not super mega necessary, but it's really, really good. Another thing that's really nasty about it is that it works through floors. So if a survivor is hooked on the second floor, you can go underneath them, press Reassurance, and the killer can literally never ever afford to camp or proxy camp, because waiting 100 seconds before the next stage is an eternity in DBD time. So yeah, it is very good, just a little bit less necessary. Hopefully I've explained why. Next up, we have the perk Babysitter. Babysitter is a bit less convenient than other anti-tunneling perks. You often prefer anti-tunneling perks that help you, like Decisive Strike and Off the Record. Babysitter applies to whoever you rescue, but it's still so good. It gives you an amazing A-B scenario, right? If the killer is away and not chasing the unhook immediately, Babysitter will reveal the aura of the killer so that you know, okay, he's far away, assuming that it's not a stealth killer or something, right? The aura would be blocked otherwise. Let's heal and let's take it easy. And if the killer does try to chase the unhooked person, this has an insane effect on them. They will make the person incredibly fast. They will give them a 10% on top of the 10% that they normally get, and this will last 30 seconds, and they will not leave scratch marks, and they will not leave blood. I've chased, and one thing that's extremely critical that we need to think about compared to the other perks that we talked about is that this perk works in the endgame. This perk doesn't punish killers for tunneling too early. It just punishes them from time to tunnel at all, and 30 seconds is a very long time. I have made the mistake. Yeah, it's 30 seconds. I didn't get it wrong. I have made the mistake of trying to chase a survivor with this perk, and they literally are faster than you. They are faster than you, are very easy to lose because of the no blood, no scratch marks, and it is just a massive mistake. Yeah, it's just a really strong effect that can also compound with with other anti-tunneling effects as well. So wow, do not chase people off the hook if you notice that this perk is active. It will be a terrible mistake. Next up is Resilience. Resilience is an incredibly simple perk. By the way, we should be moving up to this part. Resilience is an incredibly strong perk that works so well just because it's very versatile. Anytime you are injured, and survivors that are good are very comfortable being injured, you do everything faster. Gens, healing, opening gates, vaulting, opening, cleansing totems, anything will be a little bit faster, and that little bit faster sometimes can throw killers for a loop. Sometimes can make a killer swing at a window thinking that they'll hit you, and Resilience saves the day. It's a little bit of a noob trap. I think newer players should not use Resilience too much. They should look to heal whenever possible or be stealthy if they're injured and vulnerable. This is more of a confident player perk. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of people with Resilience think that they're invincible around loops and they don't play tight enough. And sometimes if you do play very tight around windows and the killer has bad ping, guess what? You're going to get hit still. So do not rely on this perk too much. But you still need to recognize it's a really strong perk. Yeah, if you have a team of survivors that have multiple resiliences, You're playing something like Legion, you injure all of them, and then they just sit on gens and just not heal. And because they have other perks, they don't go down as quickly as you'd like. You're going to feel that 9%. Not to mention the 9% stacks with anything else. So Déjà Vu Resilience, that's almost 15% faster gens, right? So yeah, quite tough to deal with. Next up, Balanced Landing, a slightly less versatile perk compared to the other exhaustion perks that we talked about, but still really, really good. You drop from a little bit of a height, you will be able to break into a sprint. You also don't make any sound while falling. This can sometimes be useful. If you are on a hill and you need to drop down and the killer hasn't found you, without this perk, you would do the sound effect, and that would be pretty bad. It could give you away. With this perk, you could also use it as a stealth method. So yeah, you soften the blow from falling and you break into a sprint. The best thing about Balanced Landing is that it can create points of safety in areas that would otherwise be really bad. You can go to a hill with no pallets, no windows, no nothing, and the killer will probably recognize that you have this perk and have to leave you, or have to commit to a chase. That's not very good. Another great thing about this perk is that in many maps there are main building generators on second floors or elevated platforms. With Balanced Landing, you can be the guy to do those gens. Other people, if they're there, they might get caught off guard, then they drop down, then they're very slow, then they go down. With you can work on that gen and be extremely safe because of it. It also makes it really awkward for the killer to hook you on hills, which is a common thing, because you have such a nice quick getaway. So yeah, very, very useful. The downside of this perk, some maps are not very friendly for it. In a few maps, such as Azeroth's resting place, you will be able to use it in 2 or 3 different spots, making it a bit a little bit situational. But if you don't mind that, or if you already know which map you're going to, thanks to a map offering or something similar, yeah, it's pretty damn good. The next perk is Flipflop, and honestly, it comes hand in hand with the next perk that we'll talk about from LOD, Power Struggle. These two perks would be gimmicky, not very useful, maybe situationally or strong against a certain killer that slugs here or there. But the really nasty part about Flipflop and Power Struggle is the team tactics that you can do with this. If a survivor dies under a pallet and there is another survivor there, the killer will have to pray that you don't have these perks. Because if you do, they are in a lose-lose situation. If they pick you up right away, you will be able to be saved by your teammate that will drop the pallet on them. And if the killer doesn't do that and you recover a little bit, now you will have enough charges on Flipflop to use Power Struggle. Even if you don't have Power Struggle, Flipflop is still pretty damn good. With Flipflop, you can go down in a corner, and if the killer picks you up after you've recovered a little bit, guess what? You now will be able to shake off the killer and wiggle off before they make it to their favorite little basement or scorch hook or whatever. So yeah, it's pretty good. But we really need to talk about the next perk. Power Struggle is the perk that makes Flipflop so nasty. On its own, Power Struggle is not super good. Killers will generally avoid walking through pallets whenever they can. But with Flipflop, this perk just becomes a bit of a meme. You can go down under a pallet, recover, and that recovery is put into Wiggle. So when the killer picks you up, you immediately can use Power Struggle. And that is pretty nasty. Not a lot of people do this. Not a lot of teams do this, but it's something that you can do. And it's just it has such a nasty sting to it. There's so little counterplay to this other than the killer just straight up slugging very aggressively. That's what makes it really strong. Needless to say, if you play against a slugging oriented killer like the twins that can't help their slugging tendencies, this combo is insane. If you play against the twins and you die under a pallet, by the time that they switch back from Victor to Charlotte and come and pick you up, you can already save yourself. So yeah, against some killers, this is situationally very, very mean. Another perk that was good but has been buffed for the upcoming patch is We're Gonna Live Forever. We're Gonna Live Forever now allows you to heal other people on the ground 150% faster. That is pretty nasty. That, if I remember correctly from the top of my head, means that a survivor on the ground can be picked up in about 6 seconds. That is very, very nasty. So it also combines very well with other perks that we'll talk about in a minute. And if you pick up the survivor, that survivor will be protected. It's hard to explain how good this is, but basically you want to create a situation where the killer cannot pick up the survivor on the ground, either because there's a flashlight save or a pallet that could be dropped. And then whenever the killer has a bit of a moment, you use this perk and bam, you're out. It's just really, really strong, helps a lot against slugging. If you play against the twins and you have this, they will hate you forever. Next up, Made for This. Made for This has a similar effect to We're Gonna Live Forever, but instead of working when you pick up someone from the ground, it works when you heal someone else, either from the ground or normally. And also, it's only on you if you're injured. So basically, the strongest thing about Made for This is when you use it as part of a team. Say, for example, that you and your friend are both injured. One thing you can do is heal your teammate to full, and then you take the hit. And the killer will normally gravitate towards you. If they see a person healthy and a person injured, they'll try to go for the person injured. And when they hit you, they'll realize, wait a minute, he has Made for This, and you don't go down. That is a pretty nice thing. For any time that you are in the endurance status effect, any time that you are deep wound, Made for This also makes you 3% faster. I'm not gonna lie, for the average gamer, 3% faster doesn't make you a god. It doesn't make you insane at loops, but it does make it even harder for them to catch up. And it can stack with other haste effects, and it is pretty nasty. So it goes really well with Off the Record or any other thing, Dead Hard, that can make you deep wound if you are confident that you can get value out of it. Do not go super crazy with Made for This. Don't go Dead Hard, Made for This, and then assume that you're going to get Tunnel and maybe the killer won. The best way to use Made for This, in my opinion, is have people with Unbreakable, have people with Made for This, spread it across your team, and then die on a pallet. If you die on the pallet and the killer picks you up, your teammate comes and drops it on the killer. If the killer doesn't pick you up, the person with Unbreakable either picks themselves up or they 99 the Unbreakable recovery. And then you come in, use Made for This, and take the hit, picking up from the ground count, and take the hit from the killer. This can create situations that are really, really nasty for the killer, and that's why I rate it so highly. Next up, we have For the People. For the People, a few months ago, used to be extremely common and annoying because of Buckle Up. Buckle Up was a perk that protected the person. Yeah, it was nasty. It was nasty, but it's been nerfed, so now For the People has dropped down a little bit. Still, an amazing perk with a lot of utility. The first thing that For the People can do that you might want to remember is it can switch the obsession. So if the killer has something like Rancor, you could make yourself the obsession so that someone else is not in danger. Something to keep in mind. You can also use it on someone on the ground to immediately pick them up. You can use it on someone injured to immediately heal them. This puts more pressure on you, but that can be a good thing. Sometimes you have never been hooked and your teammate is there on hook. So you switch that up and you immediately do that. If you're injured, you can also trigger certain perks of your own, such as Resilience, so that if you are not chased, now you can be on a jump, do it faster. So having the utility of switching a health state from your teammate to yourself, or rather from yourself to your teammate, is situationally really, really, really good. You can also apply certain other perks. You do not apply, unfortunately, you do not apply MFT, but you can apply We're Gonna Live Forever when you pick someone up like this. And that is really nasty. You can literally pick up someone from the ground and that person cannot be hit. If you do it, I think if you do it slow enough, yeah, it will work. If you, I know this is gonna sound really stupid, but basically if you heal a survivor and wait a little bit until you see the bar go up and then apply For the People, We're Gonna Live Forever should work, which makes it a really, really strong combo together. You can also use the new For the People with the new Buckle Up, which is not as good, but it's still really, really strong. Also, you can use it in situations where someone is not at the exit gate or not under a pallet to let them get a bit closer. So someone goes down, you use For the People, then they go down again, but maybe by then they're already out of the exit gate. So yeah, having one person that knows how to use this perk in the team can really, really throw up a wrench into the killer's plan sometimes, even though it's obviously a little bit risky. Finesse is a non-exhaustion chase perk that is really simple to use. When you vault a window, if it's a fastball, you do it significantly faster. If this is the first time that the killer is chasing you, they're very likely to like swing and not get you. Particularly useful against killers that try to hit you through windows. If you play against a spirit that often has to like chase you to a window and react last second, you will often throw them off. It can also be helpful against killers that hit you at the edge of a window, such as Victor from the Twins. And the best part is that because it doesn't exhaust you, and the only requirement is that you are healthy, you can basically use it multiple times in chase if you are good enough. This works particularly well with perks like Dramaturgy or Sprint Burst or anything else that you want to use preemptively to stay healthy. So yeah, it's a great way to stay healthy and delay the first hit as much as possible, which is good in general, but particularly good against killers like Oni or other killers that really want to get injured, like Spirit, that want to get injured and then their power gets better or their tracking gets better. So yeah, very, very simple, useful perk. Next up, we have Hope. Hope is an incredibly scary perk. It does no longer stack with a bunch of other perks that are very common, thank God, so it's not as strong as it used to be a few patches ago. But basically in the endgame, if you have Hope, you become a bit of a sleeping beast. It's a very quiet perk that is not immediately obvious. A killer will never be able to know you have Hope by just looking at you unless they analyze your movements very, very carefully. So what will often happen is that you have Hope, the exit gates are extremely far away, you start running towards the exit gates, the killer is very confident that they're gonna catch you, and then they chase you, and they realize, I'm not catching up, this person's just faster than me pretty much. If you are playing against a Spirit that has no cooldown available on their power, or a Hag that doesn't have traps, you literally are pretty much faster than them, right? Against a Huntress that has none of the hatchets, you pretty much are faster than them. If you are looping against some object, since your hitbox is smaller and you're 107 and they're 110, you pretty much move faster than them, and it's very hard for them to catch you sometimes. So yeah, with Hope, you can basically make the killer go into a chase that is going to be very, 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 very nasty. Not so useful against killers that are incredibly brute force in chase, like Blight, that are super, super fast. But even against them, it can be quite helpful. So yeah, very, very strong endgame perk. It doesn't have an incredibly strong, like, upfront, front-loaded effect. So it's more of a creepy perk that just sneaks its way into gameplay. But if you've ever been on the receiving end of chasing someone with Hope in the endgame, you'll understand what makes it so good. The best thing that can happen with Hope is that even if you end up dying, you run the killer for so long that your teammates have plenty of time to open the gates and get a 3-man out, for example. Build to Last is the last of our 4-star perks. This perk on its own really is nothing super insane. Basically, you go into a locker with an empty item, you come out and the item is back to full. And if you can do that again, well, it will be 2/3. And if you do it again, well, it will be 1/3. Using it multiple times, not super worth it. But that first time where you get the item whole charges back, that's really good. If you had normal medkits, this would be okay. If you had a flashlight, that would be all right. Having a key to see the killer, that can be quite okay. But the real strength of Build to Last is toolboxes. In DBD, toolboxes, if you bring the strongest ones, are really, really powerful. They can save upwards of 20 plus seconds on a generator at the start of the game. So you can go to a gen at the start of the game, blitz through that generator, do it 20 or 25 seconds earlier. And then when the killer is looking for people and the killer doesn't have a lot of pressure, maybe someone's on the hook and the killer's looking desperately for the next stage, you go into a locker, you chill there for a little bit, maybe even heal with inner healing or whatever. The killer obviously cannot find you in a locker with aura perks or anything. And then you come out and you have another 25 seconds off a gen. If you go against a team with commodities toolboxes, with big toolboxes with a lot of charges, and they use 1 or 2 of this, it can be really nasty. It also stacks with Streetwise, and yeah, it's a very boring, not quite exciting strategy that just shaves off a lot of seconds on a generator. If they ever nerf toolboxes, this perk will go down. But yeah, because medkits are so strong, even without many charges now, thanks to Resurgence, Build to Last is not that helpful with other items like medkits, but still a very, very strong perk. Next up, we move to Dramaturgy. Now, Dramaturgy is a perk that beginners should really not use carelessly. It's a perk that can get you killed. Basically, this perk has 2 parts to it. First, it gives you a small speed boost. And then after that, there is a 4 chance random event, right? You can either get another speed boost, you can either get a random item, which could be anything from a pointless green key. Can you get a green key? I think so. Yeah, it could be anything from like a pointless item to one of the best items in the game. Or you could also scream which doesn't really do much, or you could also become exposed for a few seconds. If you become exposed against a lesion that's gonna injure you anyway, well, maybe it doesn't matter too much. If you get exposed against a blight or a nurse that has to hit you with their special attack, doesn't matter. But if you get exposed against a spirit and they hit you and they kill you, well, that's not very good. So you need to be careful. The nice thing is that if you've been exposed before, you cannot get exposed twice. The effects never happen twice in a row. So yeah, you need to be a bit careful. So Dramaturgy can be used outside of chase just to get random items, which can sometimes be really, really good. And it can be used in chase to delay the first hit and have a lot of control. So basically you can run around shack. The killer is not catching up. Okay, you get greedy, do another lap. Oh, he's about to catch up. Use Dramaturgy and avoid the hit. So yeah, this perk on the hands of a very capable survivor can be very, very good. In terms of raw power, it is far weaker than the effects of Spin Burst or Balance Landing, but the fact that you control exactly what happens, it can be quite good. The nicer thing is that you could get a really strong item. The not so nicer thing is that people that are, that are a bit careless can go down to this perk, so you want to be a little bit careful. Now, one perk that is a lot more suited for beginners is Overcome. Overcome from Jonah is an incredibly simple perk. You get injured, and instead of getting a shorter burst of speed, you get a longer burst of speed. This pairs very, very well with perks like Windows Opportunity, so that you see some pallet in the distance or the main building in the distance and go right there. Or even Lucky Break, so that you become stealthy and the killer, tries to look for you and you've made a lot of distance and you're stealthy and it's hard to find you. So yeah, good stuff. Problem with Overcome, two of them. Insta-down killers destroy this perk. If you're playing against Cannibal or Billy and they insta-down you with their chainsaw, congratulations, this perk doesn't work. And then when you become unhooked, if they chase you, you're injured, so this perk cannot work. So with Overcome, you definitely want a lot of awareness against insta-down killers, and you want to heal quickly after being unhooked. So it can pair well with things to heal yourself quickly, like a Resurgence medkit or Second Wind or anything else to heal yourself fast after being unhooked. So you want to be a little bit careful. Other than that, though, amazing perk, and it can sometimes... one thing that's worth talking about Overcome is that it can destroy and shatter killer expectations. So say, for example, right, that you're in a situation where you have Babysitter and Overcome, which we talked about earlier, Babysitter. And you unhook a survivor that is really far away from the gate. This can be a lose-lose situation for the killer. If the killer allows you to unhook and chases a survivor that you unhook with Babysitter, Babysitter will make them super fast, they'll get out. And if the killer hits you and then tries to down you before you make to the exit gate, if you have something like Hope in the endgame or Overcome, they will not catch you. So yeah, this can be really, really good to take a hit from someone else and still keep yourself safe. So that can also be pretty good. Blood Rush is a super, super interesting perk that has recently been reworked into being a quite usable anti-tunnel perk. Blood Rush activates every time you're unhooked. I believe it can be used twice. It will go away. It's basically like a Decisive Strike, okay? You get it twice, or an off the record. You get it twice for when you're unhooked, and you can use it to get back your exhaustion. Now, there's not a lot of reasons to use this if the killer is not chasing you. In the end game, it doesn't work. So like you're not gonna unhook yourself and then you sprint burst and then you sprint burst a second time. That would be a bit pointless, right? Not a lot of reasons to use it. However, if the killer does chase you, this perk is amazing. You could immediately sprint burst out of the area and then get another sprint burst, and that alone would make the killer have to spend a significant amount of time catching up to you. Or you could also use Lithe or Balance Landing. You could go to a hill, Balance Landing into main building, go down at be at the top of main building, have Decisive Strike, the killer catches you, then you use Decisive Strike, then you activate Blood Rush, then you use Balance Landing again out of the main building. You understand, right? There are a lot of ways, creative ways, to basically get two exhaustion perks back to back to back very, very nicely with Blood Rush. The problem is, what if the killer has an exhaustion perk that makes you exhausted? What if the killer still catches up, or you're in an area where it's hard to use it? What if the killer doesn't tunnel you? Yeah, you at one point having 3 anti-tunneling perks might be a bit too much, and if you're only going to choose a couple, maybe Blood Rush is not the #1 pick, but it's still an okay pick. Saboteur is another really underrated perk. It allows you to sabotage a hook with your own hands. If you have a toolbox and it runs out of charges, you also can use Sabotage to finish the Sabo action without interrupting it, which is really nice. To be fair, it has a really nasty cooldown, and it also sometimes results in situations where you unhook a survivor and you try to heal them and you accidentally begin to sabotage the hook, which is really annoying. But those little downsides aside, Saboteur is awesome. Most important thing about Saboteur perhaps is the fact that it highlights Scorch hooks to allow you to play around them. Many times you will see survivors that are quite experienced be on a generator, right? And then the killer picks up and then they let go of the generator because they think that it might explode with Pain Res and then Deadman Switch or something, right? And then they wait, then they get back on the generator, then the survivor is hooked, and then they explode, and it's just such an annoying thing, right? With Saboteur, if the killer has Pain Res or any other Scorch hook, you will see it highlighted. You can immediately tell 1 or 2 perks from the killer by just looking. Sometimes you can use this against the killer. The killer, if they pick up around 3 hooks, and they see one of them is their Pain Res, which is a really strong regression perk, they will go there. So you can, even though there will be 3 hooks, you can know that the killer is very likely to go to that specific one. So you can hide next to it and last second sabotage it, and the killer will need to drop the survivor on the ground and you've saved someone's life. So you can do this without Saboteur, but it's so much harder to know where the Pain Res will be. And yeah, this is an incredible effect. And it's pretty damn good. It's pretty damn good. You can use it with other Sabo perks. You can use it on its own. You can use it with an item. You can use it without an item. And I think all of them are valid ways to get value out of this perk. Not to mention, of course, that you could also die in a corner with someone else using Saboteur to take advantage of this. Next up is Wiretap, an incredibly easy to use perk. Basically, work on a generator, activate it, the killer will be revealed around the generator. Some killers that are stealthy, like Wraith, or some killers that move in really quickly, like Nurse, that could appear from anywhere. Not always the best perk against them, but overall, Wiretap is just really, really good. If you make the mistake of chasing a survivor around certain loops where they see you perfectly, it is really, really nasty. And it also forces the killer to kick a gen, which gives you time to get away, or maybe makes them eat another trap like Blast Mine. So yeah, Wiretap, for how easy it is and how much damage it can do and how much it can make a killer useless around certain loops if you see them perfectly, it's a bit of a danger, and it's a very easy perk to take advantage of. Particularly useful in maps that are very, very tight, where one gen on the second floor will envelop a bunch of loops around it. Headon, slightly difficult to use perk with solo players. I wouldn't even bother, but very, very, very good perk, exhaustion perk for coordinated teams. The way I see this perk being used best is do not try to use it mid-chase. This can be done. You can run quick and quiet, Headon, other perks maybe as well, and in the middle of a chase, go into a locker. The killer will not notice, they'll run in front of the locker and bam. This can be done. It is a little bit obvious sometimes and you could get counterplay. The killer could just wait it out. But the stronger way to use Headon is for teams to use it as a momentum killing tool, right? So your teammate is getting tunneled. You tell them, hey, I'm in Shack, come to Shack. They come to Shack, even if the pallet's already gone, bam, you eat a Headon, the killer gets stunned, you get out, they make a lot of distance, and you can use this during the end game or even the early game. This happens quite often in tournaments to completely throw off a killer and destroy their chances to get a quick chase with that person that they really, really need to down. Another amazing thing about Headon is basement. Many times you will unhook someone in basement and the killer will be waiting at the top of the stairs. Maybe it's a trickster, maybe it's some other killer that can really punish multiple survivors coming out, and that would result in maybe 2 downs and the whole team in shambles. What you can do in these situations is both of you go into lockers next to each other and the killer has to choose. If they're clumsy, you can Headon and both of you come out. If they grab the person next to you, you can sometimes, with a little bit of luck, Headon rescue right afterwards. So yeah, it's nasty. There's also a few other tricks you can do, but basically the ability to use it as a team in some scenarios makes it quite unexpected and quite decent actually. Next up, we have Slippery Meat, which is a perk that needs to be studied together with the next perk up the ante. Basically, let's talk about Slippery Meat on its own. Slippery Meat on its own would be a 2-star perk. It would be very, very weak. It gives you about a 40% chance to unhook yourself. Not exactly, the probability is a bit complex, but basically, if you get hooked with this perk and the whole team is absolutely dying, nothing going on, and you think, okay, it's now or never, with this perk, you have a approximately 50-50 chance of unhooking yourself. That is not bad. That is a nice second chance with a pretty reasonable chance to succeed. However, the nice thing about Slippery Meat is what happens when you use it alongside Up the Ante, which we'll talk about in a second, and Luck Offerings. So let's just get to that. So Up the Ante is a team perk that gives you and other people more luck depending on how many people are alive. The thing about this perk is that on its own, it does nothing. It does basically nothing. Luck is a non-factor pretty much in most matches. The only thing it affects is your chances to get an add-on with the perk is in the hole. And also your chances to unhook yourself. It doesn't affect anything else. It doesn't affect totem spawn. It doesn't affect hatch. It doesn't affect item quality. It doesn't affect anything. Seriously, it's terrible. However, when you use multiple Up the Antes, when you use multiple Slippery Meats on each person, and then you use Luck Offerings, your chances to unhook yourself start to go up and start to stack together. To the point where if you go for a full build with this, and we've made a video talking about that recently, you can unhook yourself more than 90% of the time for free. And that is wild. If you remember how we talked about Deliverance and Wicked, and we talked about how good it is to unhook yourself, well, this is the best way to do it because you can do it anywhere. It doesn't work on the second stage, obviously, but it's still really good. The only downside is that you need a full team committed to this idea. But if you do that, it is one of the strongest strategies in the game, and it's actually quite nasty. So yeah, that's a strategy for you to try. Do not sleep on these perks. They're actually really strong. Next up is Distortion, incredibly popular perk that was going to be nerfed very significantly, but now is being nerfed a bit less. Basically, you can have up to 2 tokens that you regenerate by being in chase, and each token gives you protection from being auto-red. This is really good for multiple reasons. The simpler reason is that it allows people to stay stealthy. If you are healing yourself in a corner, or if you're hiding from the killer, or if you're really afraid because you think you are the weaker survivor in the team, you can run Distortion, and any barbecue, any cheeky Floods of Rage, Lethal Pursuer, other auto-reading add-ons or perks will not work for a moment, and you will not have to worry about your position being revealed. That's good. The even better part of Distortion, in my opinion, is the team component of it. If you have a survivor that is constantly calling out when Distortion activates, you can reverse engineer the opponent's perks and add-ons. So at the start of the game, I can tell my survivor friends, hey guys, I lost a token. This killer has Lethal Pursuer. Wait, I have a token. Oh, wait a minute, I lost another token. And someone else got hooked. That means the killer has barbecue. Wait a minute, this blind bumped next to me and I lost a token. That means he has the add-on that shows your aura when he's next to you, which is the, what is it called again? Compound 21. So with this, you can tell your teammates a lot of useful information so that they are aware of certain perks and do not mess it up. There is an incredibly long list of auto-reading perks and add-ons, and being able to find 1 or 2 out throughout the course of the game means that the killer will not catch you off guard. I'll give you one more example, just so you get the idea. If your teammate is about to get hooked and you open an exit gate, and then you step on the exit gate and you lose a token, that means the killer has Blood Warden, because Blood Warden reveals your aura when you're in the exit gate. So if you have a great knowledge of all the perks in the game, Distortion can allow you to identify them very quickly and sometimes prevent them from being very useful at all for the killer, which is really good. Nowhere as good as before. Before you had 3 tokens and they were really easy to regenerate. Distortion basically allowed you to play around a lot of stuff, but still a decent perk, especially if you use it as a team. Plot Twist is another perk that I've made a video of. Please, if I ever talk about a perk and I tell you that I've made a video of, just look up the name of the perk and my channel name. You probably will find it. It is an incredibly flexible perk, very versatile. It's a Swiss knife of healing perks, and it's one of my favorite perks personally. Plot Twist is great. It allows you to flop on the ground and slowly heal yourself on the ground, normally taking 30 or so seconds, a bit less if you have certain perks like Unbreakable or Boon Exponential. But the point is, this is a heal on the ground that is not affected by anything else. So if the killer has Sloppy Butcher, Chorophobia, anything else to slow the heal, you still heal at the normal speed. If the killer gets close to you, there's also a chance he might not hear you because you don't make any noise. And then when you get picked up, you get a bit of a speed boost, which is nice, and you're fully healed. One of the best things about this heal is that you can begin to heal yourself even while you're broken. So say, for example, that you use For the People, and you have a 60-second break, broken status effect. When there's about 30 seconds left, you can plot twist on the ground, and by the time you pick yourself up, you will have lost the broken, and it's like you started to heal yourself while you were broken, but when it's over, you can immediately finish it. So it's a really nice way to heal yourself. Is it as nice as a medkit? No. Is it as nice as automatic healing like Second Wind or a syringe from a medkit or adrenaline or being healed really quickly with Resurgence? No. The reason this perk isn't any higher is because other healing methods are safer, faster, and have less risk. With this perk, you could be seen on the ground. Mind you, if you have Distortion, the killer will still see you. Distortion does not work when you're on the ground. So plot twist can be pretty okay with perks like Off the Record. Off the Record, you can go on the ground somewhere, plot twist, and even if the killer has Deerstalker or Barbecue or whatever, they will not be able to find you. So that's nice. So yeah, it's a nice healing thing. But the most important thing about Plot Twist is not what it does commonly, it's what it can potentially do. With Plot Twist, as I explained in that video, you have a lot of little utilities that can be really, really good. So let's talk about some of them really quickly. We're not going to cover them in massive detail, but basically, if a killer is about to down you, and you think that you might be slugged, you can just plot twist on the ground. And the killer now has a really difficult decision to make, because when you plot twist, you can heal yourself. And if the killer picks you up, you don't lose the perk. So if the killer picks you up, well, now you've stopped him from slugging you. And if the killer doesn't pick you up, you will pick yourself up from the ground. If you're being tunneled and you have Decisive Strike, you could go under a pallet and then down yourself. And you could use other perks that we talk about, like Decisive or Power Struggle / Flipflop. So being able to down yourself in specific areas at specific times and forcing the killer to choose to pick you up or have you healed in a few seconds can be really powerful. Also, going down can trigger certain perks, can avoid certain effects. You can down yourself to slow down the end game and give more time to your teammates. You can down yourself to avoid the effects of the cube against Pinhead. You can down you can down yourself to avoid a tombstone from a Myers. There's like a lot of situations where it can sometimes be helpful if you are creative enough. That's why it's one of my favorite perks. Strength in Shadows is a very simple self-healing perk that only works in basement. Every map has a basement, so you will always be able to use it. And this healing is significantly faster than other options, such as self-care. So that's really, really nice. It is particularly nice with Botany Knowledge. If you pair this with Botany Knowledge, you can heal yourself in the basement really, really quickly. You can also use Off the Record so that, the killer doesn't hear you or see you while you're down there. So it is a really, really cozy way of healing yourself. Being able to heal yourself is a good thing, period. It's particularly useful in endgame if you need to go through an exit gate with a killer that could down you. It is particularly useful if you're dead on hook and you want to be safe. It is particularly useful if you want to take hits for other people and you need to be healthy to do that. So yeah, it has lots of synergies with anything of that nature that requires you to be healthy. It also shows you the aura of the killer briefly, which gives you nice awareness. I think it can be a bit of a trap. Be careful with this perk. Do not, like sometimes, even if you have Strength in Shadows, if you're across the map from basement, it might still be better to just let your teammate heal you. And because we have very strong healing perks like Resurgence right now, this perk is not as good, but it's still a really nice perk with a really nice effect. Reactive Healing is very, very similar to the previous perk. The reason why it's not higher up right now is because other perks like Resurgence, right? Other than that, this perk is amazing. Basically, anytime a survivor gets hit near you, your healing progress will be halved. So if you're at 0, you'll be at 50. And if you're at 50, you'll be at 75. And if you're at 90, you'll be at 95. Whatever is left for you to heal, it will be like halved. This saves you a lot of time. If you have reactive healing and self-care or reactive healing and a medkit, it is extremely common for the person that unhook you to take a hit for you and then you go around the corner and bam, you heal yourself really quickly. Some things can hurt reactive healing, however. If you have sloppy butcher applied and you're losing progress quickly, yeah, it can be nasty. But honestly, reactive healing saves quite a bit of time over the course of a match. It's really, really nasty. In more devious strategies, teams can use multiple of this perk to do a lot of damage. So, for example, you could have, let's say you're chasing one survivor, right? Someone else comes in, takes a hit, and then they start healing. Then somebody else comes in, takes a hit, then they start healing. And because of you're hitting so many people, the person that you're chasing is now able to heal themselves really quickly. The person that took the first hit is now already healed and coming for another hit. Like, it can make survivors get back into the action extremely quickly. It's just that overall, it is a little bit more situational. And needless to say, all healing perks are inherently risky. You might go against a plague, for all we know, right? Or an insta-down killer that doesn't even care. So yeah, they do have an inherent risk, of course. Second Wind is a fairly easy to use healing perk. You heal one survivor, and then the next time you get off the hook, you will be healed passively. If you take damage, then this perk will heal you, but only from the deep wound. But still, most of the times it results in you healing for free, and you can do a gen while you're healing, which is really comfy. One of the best things about Second Wind is that it works with For the People. So say that a survivor is off the hook, you heal them with For the People. You wait a little bit to make sure that the game recognizes that you're healing. So heal them for like a little bit, and then activate For the People, and then Second Wind will be active. And then, you know, this will give you one free heal over time, but one free heal nonetheless. Not bad at all. A little bit less appealing with the very strong Resurgence, but still pretty damn good. Next up, we'll make it an incredibly simple old perk. You unhook a survivor, you heal them twice as fast. Instead of the usual 16 seconds, it only takes 8 seconds, maybe a bit less if you hit a skill check. The best part about We'll Make It is that this bonus applies to other heals as well. So if you heal other people afterwards, not yourself, but other people, you can also pick them up faster from the ground, or, you know, you can use We'll Make It to do a few resets of health states. So that's really nice. Is it as nice as Resurgence? No. But it's still a really nice perk. It's a really comfy perk. I think it goes particularly well with perks like Babysitter or Deliverance, so that you have a plan A and a plan B. If you get tunneled, if you have the killer tunnel, then Deliverance, maybe you can take hits for them and go on the hook yourself, or Babysitter to protect them. And if the killer doesn't, then you have We'll Make It. So either they play into one of your perks or the other. So that's quite nice. It also counters the newly buffed perk from the Scroll Merchant called Leverage that slows down your heal. So yeah, being able to heal a survivor of the hook quickly is super, super useful for a variety of reasons, and this is one of those simpler ways to do it. Has quite a few risks, obviously. The killer could have a broken status effect that's applied on the unhooked survivor. The killer could interrupt you. Like, yeah, it could be a lesion. You know, maybe you don't even want to heal them. Yeah. Next up, No One Left Behind. This perk only activates during the endgame, which makes it a little bit harder to justify. Many times you don't even see the endgame, especially if you're playing solo. But once the endgame works, my goodness, this perk is awesome. It gives you extra blood points, which is always nice. It shows you the aura of all of your teammates permanently, which is incredibly nice. It makes you heal faster, which is really nice. And almost the most important thing is it makes you unhook much faster. Much, much faster. If someone else takes a hit, you can unhook immediately. If you take a hit, you can unhook guaranteed so fast that the person that you unhook can sometimes even take a hit for you. So all of this is really, really nasty. And also you give a little bit of extra speed to the person that you unhook to guarantee that they make it to the exit gate. This is super, super nice. Having one person with this perk is really nice. And the best part about it is the incredible out of reading that many times, ask yourself, how many times do you get to the endgames, you open the gate and you're like, okay, I see that Steve is being chased in the HUD. Where the hell is he? I don't hear the terrorist. I have no idea where he is. With this perk, you can tell when someone else is going for the exit gate so that you can be there to take a hit for the person that needs to. And it's quite nice. The only unfortunate part about this perk is that it's a bit of a win more perk. Many times you don't make it to the endgame. Many times if you make it to the endgame, you don't even need it. Many times if you make it to the endgame, another endgame perk like Adrenaline might just be better. So yeah, it sometimes doesn't feel super necessary. Oh, by the way, we should move down here. Next up, we have Borrow Time. Borrow Time extends the natural period of invulnerability that survivors have when they become unhooked for another 10 seconds. This means that they are faster and cannot go down for 20 seconds total. And the best part about borrow time is that it works during the end game as well. Now, the killers in general are aware that when a survivor gets unhooked, they have about 10 seconds that they cannot hit them. But many times, any killer will try to play around this. So one thing that you'll see time and time again, if the killer doesn't have a better option, they will go for the person of the hook, and then they will count in their head, 1, 2, 9, 10. And after the 10 seconds are up, they will hit the survivor. With this perk, the hit will be harder because they are faster. With this perk, you are basically baiting the killer into waiting, and then giving a speed boost to the survivor. It can be incredibly useful. Now, it does get a little bit outclassed by the perk Babysitter. And there's other perks that you could use that apply even more direct help to a survivor, like For the People or something like that. But still, Borrow Time is a fairly incredible perk. This perk used to be the most popular perk in the game, pretty much. Now it's not as necessary because this effect is base kit, but still, pretty damn good. Background Player has experienced a little bit of a nerf. It allowed you to move at 200% movement speed, and it was obnoxiously powerful. It basically made flashlight saves extremely free, pallet saves unavoidable for killer, and you know, it was very nasty. Now it's back to being a much more restrained perk. It does have a very short exhaustion, which is really nice. It means that you can run this with Dead Hard, with Sprinburst, with Lithe, and not necessarily step too much into their utility. But the nicest thing about Background Player is putting it in the hands of a really capable player. If you have a flashlight and you go in the open against a Background Player savior, they are probably going to get it. Pallet saves, you're not going to be able to do much about it. And another thing that we haven't talked about is flashbangs. Flashbangs, even though they are limited and they are risky and they don't work against every killer, Background Player makes them really scary. Even if you pick up a survivor against a wall, a flashbang placed right in front of you will still get the rescue. The reason why this isn't much stronger is because some killers can easily play around this. Nowadays, we have some nasty exhaustion perks that could render Background Player, you know, a bit less effective. Killers like Wesker can grab without even dropping the survivor. So you need to be a little bit careful, but Background Player is a very solid perk for people that want to play altruistic. I think not extremely suited for beginners or intermediates, but yeah, quite nasty on the hands of a capable player. Poise used to be one of the weakest perks in the game that could honestly be run many games in a row without ever seeing any value. Now it's pretty nasty. On top of giving you a little bit of stealth whenever a survivor is... hold up, do we have the description? Yeah, sorry, the description's updated. Whenever you see a survivor, yourself or someone else pop a gen, you become stealthy for a little bit. You don't leave scratch marks. That's not incredible. That's the worst part of this perk. Many times when a generator is popped, the killer is nowhere near you, or you're on the hook, or you're being chased, but the killer will still see you perfectly and you're injured, right? So that part of the perk honestly sucks. But the second part of the perk is actually really good. Anytime you touch a generator for the first time, you will see the killer's aura for a little bit. This is unbelievably useful for people that are a little bit newer and are really scared of stealth killers, right? At the start of the game, you can quite literally go touch a gen, and if you don't see anything, that means you're going against a stealth killer and you can play it a little bit easy. It's almost like a Lethal Pursuer, which is a killer perk, but for survivors. And if you see that it's a trapper, well, guess what? Now you can see where he's placing the traps and you can avoid that area. And you see that it's a hag, well, maybe you can go and bother her if you feel confident. So being able to see which killer it is from the start and throughout the match is such a good effect. It's a really nice info perk. And honestly, not much else to say about it. Open-handed is a perk that on its own does absolutely nothing, but it is one of those rare perks that applies to the whole team. You don't need more than one open-handed. Open-handed only works once, so one person having this perk benefits everybody. Any perk that shows the aura of a killer with a certain range based on the survivor will be extended. That means that Kindred will show the killer from much further, Keys will show the killer from much further, Bond will show survivors from much further as well. What other perks work like this? Windows of Opportunity, yeah, will also show pallets, walls, and and windows from much further. So basically, it's extending every auto reading perk. There are two exceptions, however. Number one, perks with infinite range. Alert, aftercare, empathy, anything that has infinite or near infinite range, it doesn't really benefit from this. And also, perks that are centered around objects do not work with open-handed. So if you have Wiretap, the Ada 1 perk that we talked about earlier, it does not work with Wiretap, for example. So there are some exceptions to that. However, still, really decent effect. Can be super good with Kindred in a solo play. Keep in mind that using this will consume typically 2 perk slots, whatever info perk and this. So, you need to worry, like, do I have the luxury of using 2 perk slots? And if you do, this is a fairly good combo. Aftercare is an incredibly good info perk. We're going to be talking about a lot of info perks for the next few seconds, minutes. And Aftercare is generally one of the best ones. Anytime you unhook or become unhooked, anytime you heal or become healed, you and that person now see each other. Then, if you do it with someone else, same thing, up to all of your teammates. Whenever you get hooked, the effect goes away, and you need to do it again. Now, one thing about this perk that's just not obvious is that not only do you benefit from it, much like Kindred, you also give information to your teammates. Whenever I play with someone that has aftercare, I always am so grateful. It's so good to see what someone's doing. They're doing a gen. I know to go for the rescue. They're doing the rescue. I know I need to maybe start healing to protect the person or finish a gen. It's so nice. Super good. The only thing that makes aftercare maybe not the best pick ever is that the perk Kindred is often a very similar replacement, and it's easier to unlock. So yeah, but still, really good stuff. Very recommended, worth running if you have never used it. Next up, we have Empathy. Incredibly simple perk. It has basically infinite range, so don't bother extending it. Anytime someone's injured, you see their aura. This is good for a variety of reasons. If you have a healing build, you can go and heal them. If you have a take hits for someone build, you can go and take hits. If you know where the injured survivor is being chased, you also know where the killer is most of the times. If you see that Claudette is injured and there's the claw things being chased around her, then you know, okay, killer is right there. And I imagine, and you can also see them physically drop pallets. So even if you don't have any information perk like Windows Opportunity, you can be like, wait, she just dropped Shack pallet. Okay, let's remember that pallet's no longer usable. So a lot of really good information can be deduced from Empathy. If you ever play against a Legion or a Plague who injure all the team really quickly, then you pretty much have information on all of your team. So it's a very similar perk to Bond in that regard. It's really good. Just keep in mind that sometimes you will play against killers that insta-down, or you will be chased yourself. This perk doesn't do as much, needless to say. Next up is Alert, an incredible simple perk. Anytime a killer breaks a wall, breaks a pallet, or breaks a gen, one with power or with a normal kick animation, you will see their aura. It does not work if they damage a gen remotely. So if they damage a gen with a perk like Search, that doesn't work. But anytime they are physically themselves breaking something, you will see them for a brief moment. If the killer is undetectable, you will hear the sound effect, but you will not see their aura. This can still be very good. At the start of the game, you might be on a gen and then see Alert pop up, but you don't see anything. That means that you're going against a Wraith, maybe, or a Myers or a Ghostface, and they maybe broke a breakable wall. So that can give you a hint as well. Pretty useful. Yeah, Alert is great. If you pay attention to Alert, you will see which killer it is. You will see where the killer is. You will know that a gen has been kicked, which means maybe I should go and repair it. Or maybe I should just stay away from that area. Or you will see that a generator has been broken. A pallet has been broken. And you'll be like, well, that Shack pallet gone. I shouldn't go there anymore. So yeah, great awareness overall. Incredible simple perk. And because it comes with Fang Min, which is a really easy survivor to start with, it is a really nice pick for beginners. Next up is Inner Focus. You might have not paid much attention to this perk because honestly, nobody really cared about it, and it's not a very popular or beginner-friendly character, but this perk has been buffed recently, and anytime a survivor is injured, you will see the aura of the killer for up to 10 seconds. That's really nice. That's a similar Alert or a similar I don't know, better together. There's a few perks that can give you this level of awareness, and that's really nice. 10 seconds is a fairly long time, and it also helps a lot if you need to go for flashy saves, pallet saves. You will see the exact angle of the killer, even if there's a wall between you and them. It's good awareness, especially on killers that quickly injure people, not so much on killers that insta down. Another nice thing about this perk is that it shows you the scratch marks of your teammates. So even though Bond would be better, it still gives you a bit of awareness of what your teammates are doing around you. It might also even reveal certain killer perks. So for example, if you see your teammate run around you and the scratch marks are really tight, then you can figure out that the killer has Predator. And if the killer has Predator, then you might figure, yeah, Predator still does that, right? I think so. Then you can figure out certain things like that. You can also see their own perks being used. So this is something that you will benefit from. It's a nice little side effect. Next up is Fogwise. Fogwise requires you to hit great skill checks on a generator, which not everyone is capable of doing at the start, especially if you play on console and the FPS is a bit shaky. But if you can hit great skill checks often, Fogwise is nice. I honestly think that Fogwise gets a little bit outclassed by Poised. Poised is now like a simpler, more effective way to touch a gen and immediately get information. And unlike Fogwise, Poised can also be used mid-chase. That's something that I forgot to mention earlier. But with Poise, you can be in a jungle gym, touch a gen really quickly, and see the killer for a long time doing chase, which is like having a key. It's really, really useful. Fogwise doesn't allow you to do that, but it works many, many times. Basically, if you're on a gen and you hit skill checks, you will see the killer. If you don't see the killer, it means they're using stealth, so you need to watch out a little bit. Not too bad. Any means necessary shows you the aura of drop pallets. Which is nice. If you're paying attention, anytime a pallet is dropped before it gets destroyed, you will see them for a brief time. So it can be similar to Alert or other perks to let you know more or less where the pallets have been destroyed. And if the pallet is not destroyed, you can go and pick it up. Many killers will often get a little bit greedy, and pallets that are not super important, they won't break them, you can recycle them. It's a nice effect. The only downside of any means necessary is that it doesn't do much against some killers that just straight up ignore pallets. If you're playing against a nurse, first of all, my condolences. Second of all, they might never break a pallet the entire match. They might never, you might never actually want to drop a pallet. So this perk doesn't do the best against some strong killers, such as nurse. But overall, a pretty nice effect. Another perk from Yui that is arguably easier to use, Lucky Break. Anytime you get injured, you get a big timer that starts to tick down. And during this time, you leave no scratch marks and no pools of blood. This is one of the only perks that can give you no pools of blood effect for a significant time. And it's nasty, nasty, nasty. I personally don't think this is an incredibly big deal. Many times a killer will hit you and just already want to look forward to another survivor, right? So if you go against a Legion, sometimes they hit you and they just want to go and piece off to someone else. But if the killer wants to commit to you and they hit you and then you disappear, it can be quite nasty. If you play against something like a Spirit that really needs scratch marks and really wants to track you when you're injured, this can really throw them off. Overall, a nice perk. It pairs well with other things to stay quiet, such as Iron Whale, Lucky Star, Overcome to just make it really far. I've seen builds where someone takes a hit with Lucky Break, they use Cooking Quiet to go into a locker, and then the killer has no clue where they've gone. So that's pretty good. Let me make sure I update this. So yeah, not a bad perk at all. It just encourages a sort of passive gameplay that isn't always the most universally useful, so do be careful. Camaraderie is a worse version of Reassurance. Instead of applying it to other people, it applies to you. If you are on the second hook and a survivor gets close, your second hook will go from 70 seconds to 104 seconds. Now, 104 seconds is unbelievably long. If the killer is trying to secure a kill in the end game or near the end game, this basically gives your team enough time to finish a gen, heal up, open a gate, start a little barbecue, have a nice tea with each other, and then come and heal and get you off the hook. So that's really, really nice. However, the problem with Camaraderie is that if you want to ensure that it works, you need it on everyone. If you have Reassurance on 2 people and one of them gets hooked, the other one can still use it. But if you have Reassurance on 3 people and the guy that doesn't have it gets hooked, then you don't get it. So Camaraderie if you want to ensure that it works, it needs to be on everyone, which sucks. Also, it only works on the second stage, not on the first one, which Reassurance does. So it's just an inferior Reassurance, but guess what? It's still really good. And it also helps a lot in basement because the range is greater than Reassurance, and thus you can walk over the basement and keep that person there for a long time. If the killer is camping and the camping bar is climbing up very slowly, with Camaraderie, it might force the killer to get even further out. So yeah, it can be occasionally okay to buy time, but you know, this is assuming, of course, that your teammates understand that you have this perk. The bigger issue is that if you play this perk solo, your teammates probably don't even know, won't even notice, and they might not play into it at all, which is always really, really, really sad to see. Coming up, we have Iron Will, a much more popular than before perk that used to be really popular. Now it's a little bit weaker. It does make you quiet when you're injured, but doesn't work when exhausted. This means that if a killer has a certain perk, like genetic limits, it could be disabled, and if you have your own exhaustion perks, you cannot use them together very well. Iron Will is still really, really nice. I personally think that it drops very much in utility because of Off the Record having an overlapping effect that already makes you quieter. That is better than Iron Will because it's 100% no matter what killer perks. But still, Iron Will is nice. Being able to be quiet allows you to go for cheeky rescues, allows you to do certain plays in chase, because the killer doesn't know exactly where you are. When you get behind a wall, you could get far and they wouldn't immediately be able to recognize that you're walking out, so they can mind game themselves. It's an overall nice, sweet perk. But personally, you need to be a little bit careful when you're injured and not overplay your hand. Particularly useful against killers like Nurse and especially Spirit that really, really want to listen to you being injured. Next up is Soul Guard. Soul Guard has two effects. It allows you to pick yourself up from the ground when there is a hex going on. Hexes are now more popular than before. It doesn't speed you up like Unbreakable, but it's still a nice effect. This can really come in clutch in an endgame with Noed. Say, for example, that a killer has Noed and they down you and then they go for someone else. Now you can pick yourself up and outplay it. The most important thing about Soul Guard is that whenever you are picked up by yourself or with help in any way whatsoever, even from adrenaline, you can tank a hit. This can be pretty nasty if used by a team. If you have someone with 4 people and you have Soul Guard, you can then tank your own hit. There are other perks such as Work Only Forever or Made for This that maybe are better at taking hits, but Soul Guard is still pretty okay if you use it as part of a team. If you use it by yourself, not super useful. It does have a 30-second cooldown preventing you from taking hits multiple times, but that's a very rare thing. You're never going to take 2 hits in 30 seconds. Next up is Buckle Up. Buckle Up, whenever you pick someone up, makes them basically have a big sprint burst out of it. This is still really, really useful. Not foolproof. Keep in mind that some killers can still catch up to like a sprint burst. But basically, the best idea to use Buckle Up is to have further people use it on a survivor, and then they get a massive speed boost that will probably put them out of danger's way for a little while. The problem with using Buckle Up is that against some killers, it's kind of pointless. Or very, very dangerous. You could go down to multiple hit killers like Cannibal. And if you try to use this with solo players, it is hopeless. They will probably do something stupid like go into a locker and not let you use it. So this is something that you have to use as part of a team with a bit of coordination using multiple perks. And at that point, you might want to run more consistent perks, but it's still a nice perk. Next up, Prove Thyself. Very, very simple stuff, okay? One thing that you need to understand is that when you're on a generator by yourself, you repair at normal speed. If there's 1 survivor, you repair a bit slower, 15% slower. And if there's 2 survivors, you repair double that, 30% slower. And if there's 4 survivors, you repair 45% slower, which is half. So basically, the game has a system in place to discourage you from multiple survivors being on a gen. This is normally a good thing because you normally want to split up, but in some situations, maybe at the very start when the killer is busy, or maybe at the very end on the last generator, being able to just sit on a gen and save a bunch of seconds is a good thing. Prove Thyself completely removes this debuff to everyone by just 1 person using it. It doesn't stack with itself. So if you have 1 person with Prove Thyself and that person is sitting on gens often with a toolbox and other people around them, that can be worth it. It's not going to do any miracles. It will only save you about 5 seconds to each survivor or so once they complete a full gen. But those seconds add up. It's maybe worse than Déjà Vu in general, It's definitely worse than just bringing a toolbox and other stuff, but Prove Thyself is still a really comfy perk that allows you to just do gens a little bit faster and group up and potentially save a lot of time in multiple survivors on a gen, which is something that some teams like to do from time to time. Streetwise, absolutely useless perk for beginners and in most situations. If you have a medkit and you can heal yourself once and you get a bit extra, that extra, like, it's not going to allow you to heal yourself, so it's not very good. Having a bit of extra uses on a toolbox that's average, not very good. Having a bit of extra uses on a key, I mean, it's okay to see the killer more, but it's not insane. Compared to build to last, this is just not that good. However, the nice thing about Streetwise is that it makes the strongest items a little bit stronger. And it also it also applies to your teammates. So you could use Streetwise with certain medkits to get one whole extra heal out of them. Or even better, you could use it on a very, very strong toolbox to save you about 6 or 7 seconds extra. And if someone else is on the team with you and they also have a strong toolbox, you will also give it to them. And if there's multiple Streetwises, they stack with each other. So say you spawn with Prove Thyself and Streetwise and you sit on a gen with your teammate, you can do a gen incredibly fast and your toolbox isn't even empty by the end of it. So you benefit from both of them. In these edge case scenarios, Streetwise actually begins to shine a little bit. Otherwise, probably not worth running. Boon Circle of Healing is one of the boon perks. It allows you to set a little perimeter where there's an area of effect. That area is that you heal other people at twice the speed. That is really good. Being able to heal each other at twice the speed is nice and probably forces the killer to be very careful with how they try to play hit and run. The most important thing about Circle of Healing is that it shows you the autos of injured teammates inside it. And that can be really, really good to coordinate solo players. Solo players sometimes don't even know what they're doing once they get injured. So being able to always have the idea that, oh, okay, I'm injured, let's meet up in here. And they see me, so they come and heal me. That part of the info is actually quite nice. It also works really well. Just seeing your aura, the teammate aura in general is just really, really useful. So it is probably the best of the boons still. It's just nowhere near as strong as it used to be when it allowed you to heal yourself. But still, really nice perk. Botany Knowledge has a small downside of making your self-heals a bit less efficient. Not a huge deal, considering that you can just slap add-ons on top of them. But careful, because if you don't have any add-ons, this might prevent you from healing yourself with a normal medkit. But if you play around that, it's okay. The faster healing by, let me get it right, 50% is noticeable. It is very, very noticeable. It's a great way to counter perks like Sloppy Butcher from the killer. It allows you to heal others nicely. It stacks with other perks as well, although you don't really want to stack too much healing. It's not, the returns get diminished. It's not as crazy effective as it sounds. But overall, it's just, hold up, let me do this. Overall, Botany is just a really comfy perk. Is it as nice as Resurgence or Adrenaline or all these other, or syringes from medkits, things that allow you to heal yourself for free? Basically, no. But it's a nice comfy perk, honestly. Good, decent perk. Not much else to say about it. Empathy Connection also gives you a healing boost, but only to other people of 30%. More importantly, it shows them your aura when they are injured. This is really, really nice if you have a build with autodidact or other healing perks. You definitely want the person that's injured to know where you are and to know that you'll heal them fast. So this gives a little bit of info to your teammates and a little bit of a speed boost to yourself to heal others. The only unfortunate part is that if you're playing in a team, there are stronger perks. And if you're playing in solo, it is sometimes just depressing how little your teammates care about you. Sometimes your teammate has a medkit, they plan on healing themselves, they don't even want to see you. They might even have Resurgence and just heal themselves in 2 seconds, they don't care about you. So you are, as an empath, let me tell you, it sucks when this happens, and this perk sometimes isn't that useful, but the effect itself is quite nice. And let me tell you, anything that gives your teammates information is often very, very underrated. Self-care is one of the oldest perks in the meta that used to be really, really strong back when it was super, super quick. Now it's a much slower heal. You still need to consider a few things, right? Self-care is a very slow heal. If you get interrupted, this can be disastrous. If you spend one half of a generator healing yourself, especially if there's some anti-healing perk, and then right at the end before you end, the killer interrupts you, you have wasted an amount of time. So self-care should be paired with other things to make healing a little bit faster or safer. If you have off the record on self-care, you can heal in a corner. Killer's probably not going to be able to find you. That's safer. If you have self-care and botany, you can heal yourself faster, right? If you have self-care and reactive healing or resilience, you can also make it a little bit faster. So self-care should be paired with these perks if it wants to be used often. You could also not use self-care a lot or super often, but still benefit from it. The nice thing about self-care is that it's a nice insurance. If your teammate heals you to 90% and then you get interrupted, you can finish the 10% with self-care, which is nice, without a medkit. In the end game, if an exit gate is open but the killer is around and time is on your side, you don't care if it takes you a long time. So being able to heal yourself slowly is still useful in a lot of situations where time is on your side. Just please don't use this perk in times when your entire team is dying. If everyone is dead on hook and you're injured and there's one gen left, stay injured. Don't self-care. In that situation, by the time you self-care, all of your teammates are dead. Your family members have died of old age. We are out of the in the future, and you're still self-caring. So don't do that, and this perk is actually pretty good. Inner Strength is a way to heal yourself that is honestly really convenient and really fast. You do one totem, then at one point you hop into a locker. In a locker, you are very quiet if you're injured. The killer won't see you from auto. Unless you do it in their face, it should be pretty safe. And then you come out fully healed, right? If you're in deep wound, I think it doesn't heal you fully. You will, so you want to make sure I think you need to recover from deep wound. Yeah, I think the description is a bit misleading. Make sure you're not in deep wound, or otherwise it will heal the deep wound, but not heal you to full health. So basically you heal to full health in 8 seconds. And the nice thing about this perk is that even if the killer has some nasty multiplier, to make the healing very slow, it doesn't matter. This perk ignores that. So Sloppy Butcher, Chlorophobia, Leverage, all of this anti-healing, you go into a locker, you come out. 8 seconds, always. This is awesome. This perk would be incredible. It's also a really nice perk because it's very balanced. Since you need to use a totem, it means that not all survivors will want to run this perk, right? And it encourages you to do side objectives, which is really cute. However, right now, when you watch the killer perks explain video, you will notice that one of the strongest perks in the game is called Pentimento. Pentimento is a killer perk that allows killers to turn a broken totem into a massive source of slowdown. For that reason, right now, doing a totem is very, very risky. Unless Pentimento gets reworked or other hexes become less problematic, you do not want to do totems easily for no reason. Inner Strength should be used very carefully. You should remember where the totem is, and you should cleanse Pentimento if it happens. I think other healing sources right now are better than Inner Strength just because it's so risky to do totems. Otherwise, it would be a fairly nice survivor perk. Troubleshooter right now is a slightly inferior perk to Quick Gambit from Vittorio. Whenever you're being chased, it will show you the generator with most progress. This is typically a negative. You do not, this is a negative order. It's not for you to go towards that generator. That would maybe be a bad idea. It's for you to go away from it. So you get chased, you see a generator turn yellow, and you know that your team is probably focusing on that. So you take the killer as far away from that generator, especially at the end of the game, right? So that's really, really good. And also, if you drop a pallet, you see the auto of the killer for a few seconds. Can be a little bit more if you use the perk Eyes of Belmont. So that's pretty good. Being able to see the auto of a killer in chase, it's really nice. It only works during chase, keep in mind, right? Yeah, it's kind of sweet. It's not too bad. I think that if you want to help your teammates, Quick Gambit is a little bit better. If you want to see the killer, you might want to have a key. Troubleshooter is just a comfy perk. It's a good perk, but it's just not spectacular. Try it out though, it's quite nice. Getting into the habit of just taking the killer as far away from the action as possible is generally a really good thing for survivors to do. Blast Mine is an incredibly easy to use perk that has very little downside. Sometimes can go unused, but it's still really, really nice. Basically, you repair a generator, you activate this perk, and you can trap a generator with this perk. If the killer kicks that generator, not with like passive perks, but like physically goes there and kicks that generator, they'll be stunned and blinded. This stun counts as a stun for you and as a blind if the killer doesn't have a Lightborn. And it can trigger other perks like Parental Guidance or other perks that trigger when you stun the killer and gives you a lot of points. And it's honestly quite nice. In a best case scenario, it could even delay the killer enough for them to lose a perk like Pop Goes the Weasel or give you enough time to unhook. A very common strategy for a killer is to hook a survivor, go to the nearest gen, and then pop it, right? So with this perk, if you do that, you can create an opening for you to rescue. That little stun can be really, really nice. Also, if you're right next to the generator, you can start running and you'll make a lot of distance. So it's a really easy to use perk that's really nice. It can go a little bit south if the killer has perks like Ruin or Search, where they just don't bother kicking gens, or if they just, ignore gens altogether. So yeah, do be a bit careful, but it's quite nice. Also, when a gen is highlighted by Blast Mine, every other teammate will see it, which gives them a little bit of information in case they're not aware that a gen is there, for example. Hyperfocus is an incredibly difficult perk to rate. I've made a video explaining why it's kind of really strong, but also problematic, but also not very popular. If you want to look it up on YouTube super quick, look up Hyperfocus Otzdarva or something. But yeah, the thing that you need to know about this perk is that for the average survivor, I don't think it's very good. Anytime you hit a skill check, you make the perk stronger and stronger. Skill checks will be more and more common, and each skill check will give more and more progress. A normal skill check does 1% of a gen extra, but then this can be more and more and more and more to the point where at the end of a hyper focus chain of hits, you can save 4% of a gen. You can start to save a lot. At its most extreme, hyperfocus can make a generator go in half, which is insane. Now, there are certain problems, okay? Hitting the skill checks is very difficult, especially if you're on low FPS or the inconsistent FPS that some consoles and all PCs experience. If you get interrupted by the killer or by a perk from the killer, the perk stops working. And you also need skill checks. And skill checks can sometimes happen very frequently and sometimes happen not at all. So the way to use hyperfocus is to guarantee that you won't miss skill checks and that you will get the skill checks. The way to do this is to run perks like, we're going to see it coming up, Stakeout, and also use a toolbox that makes the odds of skill checks much, much higher. With this, you can make skill checks happen and make sure that you don't miss them too much, and then you can make a gen go by really quickly. In my opinion, for the average player, running something like Déjà Vu is just better. It's just more consistent. It doesn't matter if you do a gen 20 seconds earlier. Sometimes it's better to just find it sooner and then get it done faster, Or do the right gen at the right place instead of, sometimes doing a gen a bit slower, but a better gen is better for the overall team, right? So that you don't end up being 3 gen with 3 gen super close that the killer defends forever. So yeah, careful with this perk. Stakeout, cute little perk. It gets more and more tokens when you are in the territories of the killer. This makes it not so good against killers like Sadako or the Onryo or the Wraith or Peg. Anything that can remove their terror radius will make this perk feel less good. Basically, for each token, anytime you're healing other survivors or doing gens and you miss a great skill check, it turns into a great skill check and does 1% more. Now, the really nice thing about this, healing with this is not that important, but the really nice thing is that it's great for gens. If you run this with hyperfocus, the 1% extra also gets multiplied by hyperfocus. So with Stakeout, you can hit a few skill checks and then hit Stakeout, and you will get 4%, and you can blitz through a generator really, really, really quickly. So Stakeout is a nice combo with hyperfocus, and you should try it if you've never done it. Do I think this is the absolute best thing ever? Nah, it's almost better to run other more universally useful perks and to do gens simply with toolboxes, or just to do them a bit slower but be very strong in other areas. So I don't think it's the bee's knees. I don't think it's super, super OP. That being said, if you play against cheaters or people with scripts that can hit skill checks automatically and they play hyperfocus, it's really, really, really scary. Hopefully you don't play against that. Boon Exponential, another boon that sets an area, but instead of healing faster, you recover much, much faster. 100% recovery speed means that instead of taking 30 seconds to pick yourself up, you pick yourself up in approximately 16, which is like twice as fast. That's really, really good. The idea of doing exponential is basically you place it somewhere where it's a little bit awkward, right, as a team, and then you go down in that area, and if the killer tries to slug in that area, or if you're playing against the twins in that area, it becomes really difficult. Everyone keeps picking themselves up. I think that this perk is just too much work, and there's other ways to make it easier. There's other anti-slugging perks that are more user-oriented, that are not as, that don't have any requirements really to set up, so I think exponential falls off a little bit. That being said, have I lost games to people running exponential and me not seeing it coming? Yes, I have, and it's a nasty little thing for survivors to have. It also might encourage a killer to not slug if they notice that people are picking themselves up fast. A Shadow Step is a perk that creates an area where survivors' auras cannot be read, which is quite useful, and their scratch marks are gone, and it also lingers for a little bit when you leave it. Really, really nasty perk against beginner and intermediate killers that rely on scratch marks a lot. I've seen newer players play against Shadow Step, and it's utterly confusing. For advanced players, they'll see it coming, they'll notice when it's active much sooner. It's not going to confuse them as much, but it's still a nice effect. The only problem with Shadow Step, running it by itself feels weird, and using it with many other boons requires just too many perk slots. So I don't think there's like a build where this perk sits nicely, but the effect is definitely okay. Champion of Light is an interesting perk, honestly. Some of the things that make it good are not super obvious. Let's just go with the simplest one, right? Whenever you blind the killer, they will experience a slowdown. They'll feel like they're dragging a chain ball next to their ankle, right? And this is pretty nice. It helps a lot when you're in chase. It helps when you are trying to protect someone else from going down, and it's quite nice. It has a cooldown to prevent it from doing too much, but it's a really, really nasty perk. Now, the best part about this perk, believe it or not, is the fact that while you are using a flashlight, you move faster. Normally, when you're using a flashlight, you move at the walking speed, and this does make you a tiny bit, like all the distance that you would drop from the killer, you kind of lose yourself. But with this perk and the next one that we're going to talk about, you can move very, very, very fast. So you can blind the killer while you're running away from them and not lose much distance. And for some killers, being blinded while they are moving is really annoying. For example, if you play Pyramid Head, who has to lock their camera while they're about to attack, this can be quite nasty as well. And as we'll see, it combos really nicely with the next perk. Being able to use a flashlight and move fast means that you can recover exhaustion while you're like running at almost full speed. So if you have sprint burst, for example, you can be half running and still recover exhaustion. So yeah, there's some synergies there if you know how to use them. A bit of an advanced perk, don't super recommend it for beginners. Fixated is an interesting perk because it is good for beginners, and then it's not very good for intermediates, but then it becomes quite decent again for advanced players. The nice thing that it does for beginner players is that it shows them their scratch marks. Seeing your own scratch marks gives you a certain awareness of what the killer sees and makes you understand why you should run or shouldn't run in some scenarios. That's really nice. And also, anytime you're walking, your walking speed is faster by 20%. This has some advantages. Against a spirit, you can begin to walk, leaves no scratch marks, be extremely quiet. Running is loud, but walking is very quiet. So against killers like Spirit, you can be very sneaky mid-chase. When you lose a killer out of chase for a brief second, you can walk behind an obstacle and you will not leave scratch marks, and the killer will be very confused, so you can use this for stealth. All of this is really useful. And there are some situations that you might not be aware will force you to walk. For example, when you're using a flashlight, you technically move at walking speed. If you have fixated, you can move faster. In fact, if you combine fixated and champion of light, which we just discussed, you literally move at pretty much the exact same speed as you run. So you could be running away from a slow killer and pointing your flashlight at them as you run, and during that time, you are recovering from exhaustion as well. That's really, really useful. Also, walking doesn't trigger chase for some killers, which can be helpful to avoid triggering things like play with your foot. It gets quite complex, but hopefully you get the idea. Another thing that's really nasty about walking is that if you walk faster, you will play around certain killer things, such as Pinhead's chains. With Pinhead, anytime he chains you with his chains, you are forced to walk. With this, you can make the chains feel really, really weak because your walking speed is so much nicer. And being able to go from walking to full speed faster also allows you to do fast bolts sooner. This is what really makes this perk good on the hands of experienced survivors. Experienced survivors can run you around shack, can run you around certain structures, and go from walking to running and be very quiet, difficult to predict. And they can basically make this quite nasty. They can turn things into fast bolts sooner, so to speak. So yeah, a perk that you might want to use when you start out, and you might want to use when you're already a very, very strong survivor. And the last perk in this category is Visual. Visual is a little bit of a Swiss knife to counter certain killer perks and status effects. Basically, it takes many status effects and makes them last less. This is actually really good right now. Obviously, it does not affect things that don't have a timer. Myers Tombstone, that goes infinitely, that's not going to be affected. Ghostface, even though that has a timer, that timer is controlled by the power. It's technically infinite during that time. So Ghostface is not going to be affected. Myers, infinite tier 3 or whatever, is not going to be affected, you know. But almost anything else that has a timer will. If you trigger Hunt the Ground, the duration of the instant down will be shorter. If you get hit by Sloppy Butcher, the duration of the Sloppy Butcher Mangled effect will be shorter. Any add-ons that inflict hemorrhage or blindness for a few seconds will be shorter. And the most common thing is your own exhaustion. So if you use Sprint Burst and you normally would have to wait 40 seconds, well, it's now 30% faster, so you save about 10 seconds worth of recovery, which is really nice. And one really nasty thing is that it also applies to other survivors. So if you walk by your teammates, they have a lingering legal effect where they will recover faster from these things as well. So that's nice. One thing that might not be obvious is that it also counters specific slowdowns from specific killers. So if you get hit by a clown bottle, you will actually recover from the lingering slowdown faster as well. So Visual can actually counter clown and some other add-ons from other killers that slow you down here and there. So Visual is a perk that you typically pair with another exhaustion perk, and that can be worth it. Do I think it's worth the perk slot every single time? Arguably not, but it is a perk that will have surprising little bursts of utility here and there. Next up, we move on to the set of perks that are not quite as consistent. Now, please don't take me wrong. Some of these perks are actually really good, but they require a build or a niche situation. They're just not as universally useful. You're not going to see them as often. As a result, I will be talking about them a little bit less. Metal Man is a fairly complex perk, has some risk, some reward, but the basic idea of Metal Man is if you take 3 protection hits, you get 1 free health state. This sounds really awful. Taking 3 hits just to get 1 free hit later doesn't seem all that good. But this is something that can happen very naturally during gameplay. You have a build to heal yourself quickly, so you can go in, you take a hit for someone vulnerable, then you take another hit, then in the end game, you take a hit as you rescue them, and then bam, you don't go down, you all get out. That can be really useful. You can also use it with Styptics, or with Dead Hard, or with other perks to tank hits without going down and then still activated. It's really effective in Sabotage builds because anytime a killer hits you while they're carrying, that will be a protection hit. So yeah, keep in mind that it shows your aura to the killer when it triggers sometime after, but that typically will be the end of the game. It's not a big deal. So if used correctly, this perk can be okay. I just think that most of the times you bring this perk, you're going to go against a Plague, you're going to go against a Cannibal, you're going to go against a killer that never allows you to really take hits easily, you know, so it does have an inherent risk to it. Detective's Hunch. Anytime a gen gets completed, you see chests, which can show you basement. You see totems, which can show you hexes, or show you where to use boons. And you see generators, which is really useful in indoor maps, where you're struggling to find them. If you want to find generators, other perks like Déjà Vu are just simpler, and they help you at the start of the game when you need it the most. So Detective's Hunch isn't incredible. One nice thing is that if you have a map, like a pink map, it will track all of those things, and then you can use an add-on to show it to everyone. That is really good and should not be slept on. Information of that sort is actually really nice. However, as a general rule, is it great? Nah, the information that this gives is sometimes unnecessary. Sometimes the killer will not have any hexes, or maybe you'll see the totems that are just not that useful. One nice thing is that when the generator is completed and this perk works for 10 seconds, it's not at your location, it's at your current location for the 10 seconds. So one thing that you can do is when a gen gets popped, you can run across the map for 10 seconds and then add everything to your map. That can be quite good. I think the Detective's Hunch is quite nice. It's just, not the most consistent form of information. Sometimes your team, if you're out of the uncons with them, you can just tell them what you see. You don't need a map for it. You don't need this perk for it sometimes, but yeah. Breakdown is a perk that is rarely used, but often, honestly, is quite game-changing. Whenever you get unhooked, you see the aura of the killer, which is nice, and the hook that you that you come out of disappears for 3 entire minutes. 3 minutes in DBD time is a very long time. That might as well be forever. If this happens to a couple hooks in an area, you can create dead zones that are really, really scary. It obviously doesn't work in basement because those hooks can never be broken. Nice little effect, a really nice perk to bring in general. If you want to be more proactive, please use Saboteur or something like that. But it's also a nice way to play around Scorch hooks. Many times a killer will have Pain Res, very strong regression perk in one area of the map. He'll hook one person there, and then when they exchange, he'll hook the other person there. With Breakdown, you can deny that. And it can be quite okay. It's a very simple perk to use, and it does have a nice little effect. It makes it harder for the killer to trade at a hook. They have to pick up and go for another hook. So that is quite nice. Wake Up is a perk that makes you open gates a little bit faster. It's nothing extremely game-changing. It only saves you about 4 seconds, but it's still quite nice. The most interesting thing about Wake Up that people often forget is that it constantly highlights exit gates. So even if you don't pay attention, you will always know where they are. And it shows your aura when you open the gate to your teammates. That can be nice when you're playing solo and your teammates are like, where are the gates? Where are the gates? Who's opening what? I see that the Dwight is opening a gate, but which one, you know? That little bit of aura reading and information to your teammates is kind of nice. It also works out really well if you die. If your teammates die and you're the last one and you need to open the exit gate when the killer is closing the hatch. Not too bad. Moment of Glory is a similar perk to Bitter Murmur or even Dark Sense. A killer and survivor perk. Whenever a gen is done, you see the killer aura very, very, very briefly. Oh wait, no, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This is embarrassing. I was talking about Eyes of Belmont. Is Eyes of Belmont coming out? Yeah, Eyes of Belmont is in a couple perks. It's an information perk. Moment of Glory is a slightly different perk. Forgive me, that won't happen again. Moment of Glory is a healing perk that heals you passively whenever you have opened 2 chests. This is generally really, really bad. Let me explain why. There are only 3 chests in most maps. One of them might be in basement, obviously, so that is difficult to get to and dangerous sometimes. So opening 2 different chests for the chance to heal, not even guaranteed heal, just a chance to heal over time is horrible. One thing that's also very unfortunate is that if you open 1 chest and you die, the 1 stack disappears. So you lose this perk even if you have a halfway charge. That would make this perk way too risky. Yes, technically, the perk can be active at 2 tokens and then heal you mid-chase, but it's just super risky. I wouldn't use it like that. However, there is one, I made a video about this perk if you want to look it up and see it in action. There's one nice edge case scenario for Moment of Glory, and that is if you use it together with a perk like Appraisal. Appraisal, which is otherwise a really bad perk, allows you to search a chest twice. There are actually multiple perks that allow you to search a chest twice. And with Moment of Glory, that second search, the rummaging, counts. So what you can do with Moment of Glory, what I think is actually a fairly good idea, you go to a chest, you search it to 99%, and then later when you're injured, you open it, grab an item, search it again, grab an item. Now you have 2 items, maybe one of them will be good, and then you start to heal passively. And then you get on a gen, and then you get healed over time. If you use it that way, it's a nice healing perk that, while not incredible, does work quite consistently. You could also use it in the end game. Say, for example, that you're the last survivor alive, or everyone has already died or left, and you need to go through the exit gate or find the hatch, and you're injured. You can go to basement, open a chest, search a chest again, then slowly heal to make sure that you can exit safely against a killer that could otherwise down you. So if you watch my Appraisal video, you will see this perk in its Moment of Glory. Otherwise, and for average players or beginners that don't know where chest spawns, don't recommend it. Pharmacy is honestly not as good as it used to be, but it is a much easier way to heal yourself. Anytime you're injured, you open chests faster and you will get a guaranteed green medkit. A green medkit is still a fairly slow heal. If you have something like Ace in the Hole, you could get a massive syringe or like a massive styptic on it, rather. Like something really nice, but yeah. It's not incredible. Self-care and botany knowledge or strength in shadows is typically even faster than pharmacy, but it's still nice. You could get a medkit or multiple medkits and give them to other people. You could get them in the end game. In the basement, you will always have 1 guaranteed chest. So in a worst case scenario, right? Let's say that you are dead on hook, very vulnerable, and your teammates are all doing fine. You could use pharmacy to slip into the basement, get yourself a nice green medkit, heal up, and then from that point on, play it very carefully. Since your team is doing well and time is on your side, you can heal very slowly. And in those situations, then this perk is pretty awesome. Don't get me wrong. Eyes of Belmont is the perk that I thought I was talking about earlier, is an information perk that allows you to see the killer's aura for a very, very brief amount of time anytime a generator is completed. That doesn't make it incredible. There's another perk called Dark Sense that is honestly kind of better. However, the real nice thing about Eyes of Belmont is its side effect. Its side effect is that it makes any other aura reading that is based on a timer that has a X time seconds longer by 2 seconds. This is very similar to the killer perk Lethal Pursuer if you've used that before. That is quite nice. Using this with Alert, using this with Troubleshooter, using this with, it will not work with Wiretap because that's based on distance, not on time. It's nice, it's nice. My problem with this perk, it takes a perk slot. It only helps you. Do you really need 2 extra seconds for a perk slot? I personally think it's not always worth a perk slot, but if you want to feel like you're hacking and seeing the killer through the walls constantly with Eyes of Belmont and like Poise, that can be really, really good. So yeah, it's fun. Optical Obsession is a perk that some time ago I would have rated really, really lowly for 2 reasons. Number 1, it shows the aura of yourself to the killer every X seconds, right? If you're the Obsession. And that can be really risky. There are times when you're playing against a Blight or a Nurse that is out for blood, and giving them your aura read is not what you want. You want to actually stay stealthy, right? And that's not very good. Even if you get a very minor repair speed for like a few seconds, not a very good idea. Forgive me. But the reason why Optical Obsession is actually kind of nice now is because Distortion has been nerfed a little bit. So Optical Obsession can now be a decent way to find out when a killer is seeing your aura and also call it out to your team. So Optical Obsession is basically a reverse Uno card where if the killer is seeing you, you see them. And you see, if you ever seen that meme with Elliot Page, like looking at another person in a car, yeah, you basically see each other, right? And that can be a great way to reverse engineer the perks that the killer is using, and even turn them against them. There are now many, many perks like Weave Attunement or Human Greed that show the killer your aura for extended periods of time. Zanchin Tactics as well. So with Object, you actually can turn these perks against the user. And depending on the killer, you can actually be really, really hard to catch if you see them as they see you. It's also not incredibly obvious sometimes to a killer that you have this perk, so they might think that they're smarter than you, and in reality don't even realize that you are seeing them back. So in that situation, if you are willing to take on the risk, this perk is okay. Desperate Measures is a healing and unhooking perk. Unfortunately, compared to other healing perks, it's never really been buffed enough to compete with them, but it's still okay. Basically, anytime you're healing someone, you will have at least one person injured. Often, you will have more than one, and this perk gets stronger and stronger the more injured people there are, up to a maximum of 56%. 56% is still very similar to Botany, very similar to No One Left Behind. But the nice thing is that this perk does both. Faster healing and faster unhooking, even if it's by a little bit, can throw killers off. Sometimes you can unhook a survivor, the killer interrupts you, then you unhook again, and then the killer, the survivor that you unhook takes a hit for you because you are fast enough to start running a little bit because you unhook faster. So this measure is nice. Personally, I prefer the other healing and the other unhooking perks, but it is okay. Leader also does a similar effect, but Leader is a perk that you apply to other people. Basically, anyone that's nearby and for a little bit lingering, if they leave you, they heal faster, open gates faster, do totems faster. Everything that's not gens and chase related, they basically do faster. The main appeal of Leader is that if you're on the hook, you get unhook quicker, very significant, and you get healed a little bit faster. Very nice, not incredible, but nice. If it's multiple survivors healing you, it applies to all of them. And you can even walk by a survivor on the gate and let them unhook faster as if they had wake up pretty much. It's quite nice. It's not the most impactful perk in the world. Leader is not going to completely turn a game around, but it does have a nice effect and it applies to a lot of little things, so it's kind of cute. I personally like it, but I often run other perks that are a little bit better. Soul Survivor, depending on how you rate it, could actually be a much stronger perk than what we are rating it right now. If it comes to helping you escape as a lone person, it's pretty much the best perk in the game. Anytime a survivor dies, the killer's ability to see you becomes harder. You basically have like a shield that becomes bigger and bigger and bigger around you. And the more people that have died, the less the killer can see your aura. But the most important part is that if you are the only survivor left, the exit gates are open very, very fast, to the point where it's incredibly difficult for the killer to close the hatch and catch you. If you wait by an exit gate with Soul Survivor and the killer closes the hatch, unless they are right next to you, they are almost guaranteed to lose you because you open them so fast. It can also be used with Wake Up to also make it really, really likely that you'll escape. You also open the hatch faster. But yeah, that's only if you have a key, and it also makes you repair faster if it's the last gen, but that's a super rare scenario, so you can completely ignore that part of this perk. Next up, we have Smash Hit. Smash Hit is a very unique exhaustion perk. It has the advantage of having a shorter recovery time, only 20 seconds of exhaustion, which is nice, but it is way harder to use. You need to hit a killer with a pallet. Now, this doesn't seem so crazy. If you play against Trapper or a Wraith, yeah, you're gonna get a stun here and there. If you rescue someone from the ground, you're gonna get it. You can also use it with Decisive Strike. A very common combination is to run, well, not very common, but very, very underrated combination is Smash Hit Decisive, go under a pallet, use Decisive, drop the pallet, even if the animation doesn't fully play out and the killer doesn't actually get stunned, as long as they get hit by the area of effect of the pallet, you still benefit from it, and it's really, really nice. Smash Hit is quite nice. The only problem, the stronger killers often never get stunned. Nurse rarely walks through pallets, Nemesis rarely walks through pallets, Huntress rarely walks through pallets, lots of killers just ignore pallets. Vecna can hold the pallet up. You know, there are so many killers that hit you over. Slinger, for example, they will just wait for you to drop the pallet and shoot you over. Like, there's so many killers that play extremely carefully around pallets that forcing a stun is difficult. And for that reason, Smash Hit becomes a little bit more situational. Chemical Trap activates when you do a bit of a gen. You can put it on a pallet. If the killer breaks a pallet in any way, they will be slowed down. Very, very useful against weaker killers that are forced to break pallets. You put this in check and you start run, you make a lot of distance. Unfortunately, killers that ignore pallets will hit you over it, will ignore it, will play around it, like a Nurse, for example. So this is a perk that frankly just doesn't do enough against those stronger killers. If you have Decisive Strike, that's good against every killer if they tunnel. If you have Chemical Trap, you might not use it. I've seen so many people try to use this in Chase and utterly fail. Every now and then, it does annoy me a bit, but yeah. It now has been buffed a little bit if you didn't catch it, and activates a little bit earlier. So that is nice, but yeah, difficult to make this perk feel worth the perk slot, in my opinion. Flashbang is a perk that for the average and beginner survivor is honestly hard to justify. You work on a generator a little bit, then you need to get into a locker, then you come out with a special item, and you're going to be able to do this maybe 2-3 times per game, depending. You could do a bit more, but you waste quite a bit of time doing this. Flashbang can be used by yourself, and it's okay. For example, when a killer breaks a pallet, you can throw it on the ground. That might disorient them. You can also throw it around the corner so that if a killer comes around a corner, like say, for example, a Wesker or something like that, you could blind them before they even realize, right? Like, you could throw it at a spirit that's approaching your area. You could also throw it on a hook when a killer is approaching, and many times the audio in this game is really confusing. They might not hear it, right? So there are some situations where you can use Flashbang kind of by yourself. But the number one use for Flashbang at higher levels is to use it to rescue people. Really good survivors that have the timing down can go to a killer and throw a Flashbang right in front of them. Even if they are literally facing a wall, you can still blind them. And that makes Flashbang an incredibly, incredibly scary perk to go against, because it allows you to rescue. Unless you're like a Wesker that can grab immediately, you will very often have no real way to play around this. Now, background player did get nerfed. It's not as easy as it is before. Exhaustion perks for killers are getting stronger, so you might not be able to rely on that. And at the end of the day, if you're good enough to use background player and Flashbang, you might as well use other perks that are a little bit more consistent and more powerful and less killer dependent, in my opinion. So for that reason, I don't rate Flashbang extremely high, but if you are going to play at that higher level, this perk does obviously get quite a bit stronger. Parental Guidance is an incredibly simple perk. Anytime you stun the killer, you don't do noise for being injured, no blood, no scratch marks for a very chunky 7 seconds. This is actually really good, and it is deceivingly useful. If you stun the killer with Headon, this works. If you stun the killer with Decisive, this works. Palette, it works. If you wiggle out of the hands of a killer after a flashy, not a flashy save, I think, but like, I don't think a flashy save works. But basically, anytime you stun the killer in a variety of ways, this perk works and can throw them off. Being able to lose the killer like that is really, really handy. And those other perks that I mentioned, Decisive Strike, Headon, are actually good perks. So this perk can be a nice way to like round up a build and lose a killer. Unfortunately, many killers can still have ways to track you. They can still have auto read. So it's not the most insane, 100% value, but yeah, it's not too bad. The next perk is Scavenger. I don't recommend almost anyone to use. This perk is honestly quite terrible. It allows you to open a chest twice to get a yellow toolbox. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And also, if your toolbox is empty, you enter a period where you need to hit skill checks. And if you hit skill checks, 5 of them, which for beginners is not easy, you then enter another period where you are slower at doing gens, but you get the toolbox back. In most normal situations, this is, even if you bring a toolbox yourself, this is complete, utter waste of your time. However, the thing is, as we explained earlier when we talked about build to last, some of the strongest toolboxes in the game for Survivor are very powerful. So if you get to a gen and then you destroy that gen with your Commodious toolbox, and then you hit a few skill checks afterwards, and then you get the toolbox back, you can do it multiple times. You can get the toolbox back twice per game. In games where the killer is fighting really, really hard for generators, this perk can actually be quite nasty. You can get a commodious back a couple of times. So if you're really good with skill checks, willing to bring a really strong hitbox, and you have a bit of awareness of how to play around this perk, and I've made a video if you want to look up Scavenger, not Otzdarva or whatever. If you want to see what it looks like, please look it up. You'll see that you can actually get nasty value out of this perk, but it is something a little bit advanced and you need to know what you're doing. If so, it's okay. Clairvoyance, an interesting information perk that honestly is a little bit hard to build around. Basically, if you cleanse or bless a totem, you have the ability to use this perk if you don't have an item on your hand. So it encourages you not to keep an item on your hand, which is not ideal. And it shows you chests, which can show you where basement is, exit gate switches, I guess useful in a few maps, generators, which is always nice. The hatch, which is the most important, and hooks. Hooks is for Sabo, but you're probably not going to sabo with Clairvoyance. So how do you use this perk? 2 main uses. In the endgame, if your team is dying or your team has already escaped, you can cleanse a totem or bless a totem really quickly, and then you go to the middle of the map, you use Clairvoyance, and thanks to its massive range of 64 meters, you are almost guaranteed to find the hatch. If you don't find the hatch, it means the hatch is so far that you could wait by an exit gate nearby, and the killer will probably never be able to stop you when they close it and you open it. So Clairvoyance can be a great way to guarantee that you find the hatch for yourself. It also can be good to find generators indoors, even though there's better perks to find them, like Déjà Vu or Visionary or Detective's Hunch, which we talked about earlier. But yeah, it's nice. Now, one other thing that Clairvoyance does, forgive me, is it allows you to use an item in a way that makes you be able to go through enemies sometimes. So a killer that's vaulting a window, you can actually go through them if you hold Clairvoyance. I think this has not been patched out, so forgive me if this is outdated information, but that's something that you could use, and I think I made a clip here and there. If you want to look that up, maybe someone else has covered it. It can be an interesting idea. Tenacity allows you to recover on the ground as you move. Normally, you have to choose between staying on the ground or moving. And also makes you move significantly faster. Normally, you move less than a meter per second. With this, you move like a little bit faster than that. Also makes you a little bit quieter, which is a new thing that got added after some time. Overall, really nice perk. Anytime you are slugged with Tenacity, if the killer leaves you for even a second, you're going to be so far away, and you can start to crawl towards your teammate. By the time you crawl to them, you'll already be fully recovered. This is an amazing perk to to bring when your teammate knows about it and they play around it a little bit. It works really well with exponential. With exponential, if the killer leaves you on the ground, you can crawl to exponential and then recover by yourself. The problem with tenacity is that there are other better anti-slug perks, such as Unbreakable, Flipflop, Power Struggle. So you probably don't want to have 4 of them. So you're going to pick 1 or 2 or 3, and you're probably not going to pick tenacity because it's a little bit worse. And if the killer picks you up immediately, it doesn't do much. So it's not amazing. Oh, by the way, we should be right here. But it is quite nice. It is quite nice. Honestly, I have lost quite a few survivors and lost a hook or 2 because I didn't find the survivor that I slugged very, very recently. It can be quite nice. Teamwork Power of 2 is an interesting perk. Whenever you pick up a survivor from the ground or when you heal them to full, you both get a bit faster. Is this as insane as Buckle Up? No. Is this as good as having a Spin Burst and having a 99? No. It's a very, very small 5% haste effect. This is basically useless if the killer is not on you. If the killer is on you, it's also useless sometimes. Let's be honest, if you're 5% faster, but then a hunter snipes you, like, what's the point, right? Basically, the idea with this perk is that you can stack it with another perk called Blood Pact or with other perks like Hope, and then make yourself very, very speedy, and then you run together around certain buildings or parts of the map, and then the killer can be in this lose-lose situation where they really can't chase you. In my opinion, it's way too situational. It requires way too much stuff. It often requires several other perks to work and opens up certain risks. So I don't think it's incredible, even though this perk got recently buffed and now has less cooldown and less requirements. I don't think it's super worth it, but it can be fun. Try it out with a friend using the aforementioned strategies. Next up, Left Behind. Whenever you are the last survivor, the hatch is revealed to you within 32 meters. Even longer distance if you have something like Open-Handed. Not too bad. This obviously works if your teammates have all died, and it's a great way to find the hatch and open it with a key or just escape before the killer finds it. But it also works if your teammates have already left. So in a situation where your teammates all get pushed out of the exit gates and the killer turns back to you, you could run into the middle of the map and try to find the hatch with Left Behind. Not too bad. Just like Sole Survivor, it is an amazing perk to guarantee your own survival. Some people appreciate that. Some people think that maybe their perk should help the whole team, not just them. So it depends on a little bit on what you think is like the most important thing, but it can be okay for that. Visionary is an incredibly simple perk. It shows you gens within 32 meters, and it has a bit of a cooldown for whatever reason. I guess they need to make tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. But yeah, Visionary, actually an underrated perk. True, if you go to a big map that is super open, like Rotten Fields, the generators are very easy to find. You can see them from a mile away. In that situation, Visionary might as well be like an empty perk slot. But there are so many maps, such as Larry's, Midwich, Hawkins, indoor, like building-centric maps such as Badham, Haddonfield. These maps can have gens that are sometimes there and sometimes not there. And sometimes you will not know from a glance if a generator in a building has been completed or not if you didn't pay the most attention throughout the match. Visionary is incredibly helpful in these maps. It's incredibly helpful for beginners. And honestly, the only reason it isn't a little bit higher is because Déjà Vu, which is a common perk, is just a better perk. But Déjà Vu is just straight up better. But if you don't have Déjà Vu, Visionary is an okay way to guarantee that you're always finding gens even in tricky maps. For that reason, not too bad, believe it or not. Lucky Star, an interesting perk. It doubles as a stealth as well as an information perk. The way you use it is very simple. You go into a locker quickly, you come out, and bam, you see your entire teammates, and you also see the closest generator in case you didn't already see it. Doing this at the start of the match is actually a really nice way to reverse engineer the location of the killer. If you picture a map, right, and all of your teammates are in this corner and you see them all, well, you can figure out that the killer's probably on the opposite end. So being able to see where your teammates are and where they're going for the next 30 seconds is actually really, really good. You might also notice that for the next seconds after leaving the locker, and I think also while you're inside it, you don't leave blood and you don't make noises. Normally, if you're injured in a locker, you are quiet, but not 100% quiet. So if you're in a basement situation right? And you go into a locker, the killer will literally have to guess. They will not know where you are unless they see the blood leading to it. So that's really, really nice. And if you head on the killer or Decisive Strike the killer, you will come out of a locker with no blood for the killer to follow to. So you could run Lucky Star and Decisive Strike, right? Go into a locker, get pulled, come out, get pulled or whatever, and you would benefit from that stealth. That's actually quite nice. Is it better than other stealth perks? Maybe not. Is it better than other info perks? Maybe not, because you have to find a locker, but it's not too bad. Dark Sense is a universal perk that every survivor starts with and can show up in your blood web even without any unlocked perks, and that's quite honestly the nicest thing about this perk. Anytime a gen gets done and the killer gets close, you will see their aura for 10 seconds, which is a fairly nice duration, and this can avoid situations where you don't know exactly where the killer's approaching from. If you don't see the killer's aura, you can also figure out that it is a stealth killer, if I am not mistaken. So that's also a way to let you know that, hey, maybe you're in a bit of danger. Not a terrible perk, considering it's so accessible, but ultimately not as good as other information perks. Still Sight is a bit of an awkward perk. Honestly, it would be so much better if it was only 3 seconds instead of 4. But basically, when you stand still, you see the killer and you see generators around you. Chests as well. Chests, I guess, can help you find out if the basement's there. It's important as a survivor to see where the basement is, because against many killers, you actually want to make sure you stay the hell away from it. So if you see that the basement is next to Shack and you're next to Shack and you're playing against Trapper, maybe get out of there. So yeah, this is honestly a nice perk. You might think that staying still a lot is not a great idea, and that is true, but this also applies when other people are doing things to you. So for example, if you are being mended or healed by a teammate and the killer is approaching, you will know where the killer is coming from. You will see the gens around you. Also, if you're waiting for your sprint burst to come back, you can wait a few seconds, which is not a huge deal, and see where the killer is approaching when you hear the terror radios. So honestly, Still Sight is actually kind of a nice perk. It's just, you know, it encourages you to play a bit passively, and it's on a licensed character that you probably will not buy as a beginner. So by the time you've bought this character, you might not need it at all. Blood Pact is a similar perk to Teamwork Power of 2 that we saw earlier, but it has a few more conditions and gives a bit more info. Basically, this perk only works if you're not the obsession. If you are unlucky and you have some other perk and you become the obsession, that will suck. Or if you use for the people, that sucks. Or if you use Decisive, well, it sucks. So yeah, this perk kind of discourages you from using other perks, which is a really sad thing. But basically, the obsession will see you and you will see the obsession, and that bit of info is really, really helpful. That alone makes this perk usable in the worst case scenario, but only if you are injured. That is what makes it not so good. And then what happens is that if you heal the survivor that is the obsession, or if they heal you, you both get a haste effect if you stay close. You can stack this with the other perk that we talked about earlier, Power of 2, and that makes it a bit gimmicky, but honestly, not super, super, super good, unfortunately. Lightweight is another perk that is unlocked for survivors early on and is very accessible. It makes your scratch marks disappear a little bit sooner, which can be really, really useful and deny critical information to the killer. And it also makes them appear more spread out, especially in indoor maps like Larry's. You can go around the corner, and if the killer tries to follow a set path on the ground, they're going to be so confused. It's thrown me off for a loop every now and then. Personally, I think this perk is too passive. If you don't have Fixated, you're not even aware of when your scratch marks are actually becoming confusing. So you kind of run this perk and hope that it does something. Personally, I'm not the absolute biggest fan of it. I think a lot of people run it, sometimes to basically no effect, but it is all right. And it's very accessible, so that's nice for beginners. Better Together. This perk used to be a common perk for everyone, and I liked it back then. Now it's a licensed perk. Basically, whenever you're on a generator, that generator gets highlighted to other people. Unfortunately, there are about 5 billion ways for a generator to become yellow, some of them including killer perks. So sometimes a survivor might not even realize that this perk is active. And when you're doing a gen, if a survivor goes down, you see the aura of the killer. Well, not really the aura of the killer. You see the aura of your teammate, including the aura of the survivor being carried. Survivors being carried are not revealed by auras almost at all. So this is the this is one of the few perks that can actually show you where a survivor is being taken so that you can anticipate, okay, he's going into basement, okay, he's getting close to me, blah, blah, blah. But other than that, Better Together is just simply a worse Kindred. Just run Kindred, just run Bond, like run other info perks, run Déjà Vu for gens, and it's typically way, way, way better. But Better Together is still not bad. If you have it, run it. It's probably going to be better than some of the other very mediocre perks. Small Game shows you the approximate location of totems. This is honestly awful for beginners. Beginners sometimes will hear this perk activate. I remember there was one time when I heard this perk activate and I looked for a totem in the area for about 5 years. And I didn't realize that it could spawn behind a little thing that I had never seen before. It's just such a confusing perk for beginners. Beginners should not be cleansing totems for no reason. Some of the perks like Know It, which are difficult totems to find, or Plaything already highlight themselves, so you don't need Small Game for that. And you can also use maps to find totems very easily, or detect this hunch if your build requires it. So Small Game is possibly the worst totem finding perk in the game. I think it's better on experienced players that already know the approximate location of totems, so they can go to a place where they know a totem can spawn and just check it. And it's also nice that it tells you the amount of totems that have been cleansed in case you want to cleanse all of them. Now, the unfortunate part about Small Game is that, as I explained a bit earlier, there are right now a lot of killer perks that get stronger if you start to do totems, especially Pentimento. So doing totems is very risky, and I don't think you should do it. And if you do it, I don't think you should dedicate a perk for it. Illumination, possibly the worst boon in the game. You basically set a boon, and if you step on that, you see the auras of all generators, which is nice. You also cleanse and bless totems 10% faster. I have no idea why that's a thing. That's completely useless. This applies to other people coming into the boon. It's actually not too bad. Like, giving information about gens to your teammates is nice, but you don't even know if they have Déjà Vu. Why would you set this up when maybe your whole team has Déjà Vu? When maybe your whole team already knows where the gens are? When maybe your whole team doesn't need it? When maybe your whole team is also running this perk? You know what I mean? It's just an awkward information perk that is not good enough for solos and not necessary for teams. Personally, I kind of like being able to see the gens. Seeing the chest also tells you where basement is, so that you can avoid it if that's important. But yeah, not super, super good. Exaltation. Anytime you stun the killer, whatever item you have gains charges 25% back and upgrades itself. This is awkward. This is really awkward. I've actually theory crafted this perk quite a bit to see how good it can be, and there's just not that many scenarios. Say, for example, that you have the best toolbox in the game, which is a commodious green toolbox, and you stun the killer with this. You might actually get a Sabo toolbox, which is not what you want. So if you have a flashlight and you upgrade to the next flashlight, that's still the same flashlight. It does the same thing. If you want to have more charges, you could run Streetwise or Build to Last, which doesn't require you to stun the killer. As I explained earlier, forcing a pallet stun on the killer is unbelievably difficult against some killers. If you play against a Nemesis, you might very well never stun them if they don't make a mistake. Or if you play against the Hunters, you might actually go down trying to stun them, and then they never walk through the pallet. So it's a really risky perk to do an effect that's just not that good. If you want to recharge your items, Build to Last is just better. If you want to have more charges without conditions, Streetwise is just better. If you want a rare item, just bring it from home. Why? But, I have to say, there is one nice use for this perk, and that is green keys. Green keys are essentially useless. So one thing that you can do with Exultation is bring a green key, stun the killer, and turn it into a purple key to open the hatch. Or stun him again, and turn that purple key into a pink key, which is actually fairly good. And if you escape with that key, you get to keep it. So that is maybe the next thing I can say about it. Not very good otherwise, sadly. Overzealous. And anytime you cleanse or bless a totem, you do gens 10% faster. If you're lucky and you cleanse a hex, you do gens 20% faster. If it goes away if you get injured. Overall, the 20% or 10% extra speed is not that crazy compared to the several seconds that you're going to spend doing a totem. So this isn't insane. If you want to do gens faster, Déjà Vu is more consistent. Resilience is more consistent. Toolboxes are more consistent. It's just not that great. As I explained earlier, cleansing totems in the current meta for killer is very risky. The Hex Pentimento can actually be used to revive the totem and make it a massive slowdown that is going to massively overshadow any 10 or 20% that you could gain, so it's very risky. I think this perk does a nice effect, but it's just not worth it. Other perks are definitely a little bit better. Solidarity is actually a nasty perk. I'm sorry, I'm a bit soft. Basically, when you heal another survivor, at the end of a full heal, you will have healed 70% of your recovery yourself. So after healing someone for, say, about 16 seconds, they can heal you now in only 3 or 4. That's awesome. One tiny problem. If you are injured, you typically do not want to heal other survivors. Most of the times, when a survivor needs to be healed, they will be healed by someone healthy. Say that you go to the hook and you're injured and the killer finds you and you go down, the whole team is in disarray. You typically send a healthy survivor to heal an injured one or get them off the hook. So Solidarity is a bit weird. You don't typically have a situation where you're injured and want to heal someone else injured. But when you do, the perk is pretty nice. It's a little bit risky, though. You cannot use a medkit to heal someone else. It will not work. If you go against Plague or some killer with some massive anti-healing thing, it can be nasty. So despite the nice boost of efficiency that this gives, something like Botany Knowledge or some simpler healing perk can be a bit more universally useful, and it can be less situational. But it's still an okay perk. It's not bad. Especially, one nice thing is that it goes well with Autodidact, because any progress that you lose from Autodidact does remain with Solidarity, if you know what I'm talking about. So, you know, it can be okay with other healing perks. Next up is Corrective Action. This is an amazing perk to just put on if you have a build and you don't care about your fourth perk. Anytime someone else misses a skill check in the entire map, the skill check will not be missed and you will see their aura. If you're playing with a teammate, you could even miss skill checks on purpose to reveal your aura. I think the description doesn't explain how many seconds. I'm so sorry. I think that's a wiki problem. But it will reveal your aura, I think, for 10 seconds or something along those lines. Not too bad. Seeing someone's aura is nice, and being able to point at them and laugh at them that they miss a skill check is nice. Maybe one of the best things about Corrective Action is that you can put it on to help your teammate that is new to the game. That's really nice of you. And it can help you a lot in 2 situations. Number 1 is if the killer has a build totem. If the killer is a doctor with like Merciless Storm, I think that should work. It will still block the gen, but it should be less. Overcharge, these really nasty things. This can make the impact of that build much, much less, especially if you keep getting stacks on this perk by hidden skill checks. And it can also be very good in the many, many situations where a survivor has to leave a gen and then a random skill check pops up. If you've played Survivor, I'm sure you're aware that anytime you leave a gen randomly, there is a chance, about a 7% chance, according to our calculations, that a random skill check will show up at that exact moment and you will lose 10% of a gen. And that feels awful. So having one person that can make that not happen for everyone else could be okay. Keep in mind that a missed skill check or 2 is huge in terms of progress. So it's definitely not too bad. Also, not incredible, however. Barding Inspiration, by the way, I have to say, this perk has been bugged for some time. Supposedly, it should have been fixed, but I still hear from people that the perk doesn't work. So please, if you're going to use it, double, triple check that the perk actually does something. The idea with this perk is that you pull a little ukulele and you start to sing a YouTuber apology. And after 15 seconds, you and the people around you, if there's anyone, get a random buff of either 1, 2, or 3%. You also have a 5% chance of nothing happening, apparently. So this buff is a little bit like hyper focus. It gives extra progression on skill checks. And overall, this is incredibly inconsistent. You can get on a gen and go halfway through the gen and get 0 skill checks. So this sucks. Potentially, this mega sucks. However, if you are willing to do a little bit of scheming and teamwork, this perk can actually be quite worth it. The idea is that at the start of the game or at some point when everyone is together, you waste a little bit of time to apply Bardic Inspiration. It doesn't stack, by the way, so just one person. And then people split up with their own different gens with ideally a skill check toolbox, so that, you know, a toolbox makes the skill checks happen more often. So with a toolbox, and then they start, and then everyone's hitting skill checks, and each skill check is you need to hit them. Obviously, it's even normal skill checks work, but if you hit great skill checks, even better. And you hit skill checks, and then 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%. This gets pretty damn nasty. Unfortunately, the luck base part of it, the fact that the killer could find all of you at the start with lethal pursuer, the fact that you could all spawn really far away, the fact that, you know, all of these but what ifs, all of these conditions makes this perk just fun, but ultimately a bit difficult to conceive working really consistently. As a solo player, forget about this perk. Don't even touch it. As a team, you might want to do something fun with it, but there's probably other more consistent options. Quick and Quiet, very simple perk, has a cooldown of 20 seconds. If you vault a window, come out of a locker, go into a locker, vault a pallet, blah, 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 you will be quiet. Keep in mind, it's not always 100% quiet. If you vault if you go into a locker, the locker itself will not do the flappy door noise, but you will still do a little, like a little noise that if a killer is close or attentive enough can hear. This is honestly not an insane perk. It's a very accessible perk that people will often unlock early, and it feels really strong. And you can use it to deny perks like I'm all ears, which will not trigger. And confuse the killer here and there, but if a killer sees you use it once, they're going to expect it. It's good with Headon to set it up quicker without having to slow enter the locker. And you can also use it with Lithe and some other exhaustion perks to try to like confuse a killer a little bit. And it can be okay. I just think that as a perk is a bit too gimmicky, and other perks might be a bit more consistent. Oh, I'm so sorry. Boil Over is an interesting perk that particularly harms people on controller or beginner killers, especially if they're on a map that has tight doorways. Basically, when you get picked up, you start to kick side to side like like a horse, and the killer is he'll have a harder time taking you to the hook. If he picks you up and he's not paying a lot of attention, the closest hook will be obscured. So if there's a hook next to a wall and they don't know, if they're not smart or experienced enough, they might actually ignore that hook and waste time going to a further one, which could be quite good. The best part about Boil Over, however, is the fact that if you are on a tall building and the killer has to drop down, they will give you a boost of recovery, and that's what makes this perk a little bit scary. In some maps, Boil Over can be used to go down in a specific area where, with a bit of help from your teammates, the killer will have a really hard time hooking you. This used to be way stronger, now it's been nerfed to a point where it's really not that scary, and there's only a few maps where this can even be done, so you don't need to use a map offering, several survivor perks, you know, this and that, and ultimately it could completely fail if the killer just decides to play differently, or if it's a slinger or a pyramid head who can decide, you know, where you go down, or they can send you off in a cage. So it is a little bit risky. I personally think that even though a lot of people will unlock Boil Over when they buy Kate for Windows Opportunity, this perk is just not that good at any level. If you have a plan for it, great. If you want to run it because you don't know what to do with your fourth perk, it can occasionally be okay, but nothing super crazy. Breakout. Wait, hold up. What am I forgetting? Am I good? Yes. Breakout, very simple. It makes you faster when you are running next to the killer as they carry someone else. This makes agitation even unable to hit you. You will never ever be hit by a survivor, by a killer carrying a survivor unless you run into something. And more importantly, it makes that person break out a little bit faster. This can be good on a Sabo build. I personally think that if you have background player and a good Sabo box or Saboteur, breakout is a little bit unnecessary. The best thing that breakout can do is make a survivor wiggle faster, and then when the killer drops them, if the wiggle is very advanced, the survivor will not be dropped, they will actually wiggle out. So that can be good. If the killer takes too long to drop them, you all understand how that works, I'm assuming. So that's quite nice. I personally think that almost any other perk with a stronger effect would be better in a slugging, in an anti-slugging or a sabotage build, even Unbreakable, so that you can take a hit and go down and still pick yourself up might be better. I feel like this perk has just very strong competition, but the effect is fun, and the killer will probably hate you if you use this perk against them. Oh. hold up. Seems I did not go to the right one. Self-preservation, very, very simple perk. Anytime someone takes damage near you, 16 meters is pretty generous, you become stealthy for a little bit. It's kind of like a parental guidance, but from other people. This can actually be okay. For example, one of the best ways that this perk can help you is if you're being tunneled, right? Say that you're playing against a spirit or some other killer that's trying to hear you, and someone takes a hit for you, and then you keep running, and then for the next few seconds, the spirit is like, huh? Where's the blood? Wait, let me use my power. Huh? Where's the sound? This can actually be really, really decent and has been used in tournaments even to throw people off. Overall, I just think it's not impactful enough. Compared to some of the other perks that we talked about earlier for stealth or for massive quick healing or massive anti-tunneling, there are just simply better ways to make yourself difficult to find and difficult to catch compared to just trying to be stealthy for just a few seconds. Yeah, nothing super, super insane in my opinion. Light-footed is a bit of an interesting perk, okay? It only works when healthy, which is a significant condition, and has a cooldown when you do a vault, for example, right? When you do a rush action. But this perk has the nasty effect of making you completely silent when it comes to footsteps. This, I don't think, is incredibly useful for beginners. Beginner killers do not use their ears as much as experienced killers. They don't know when to listen in. And oftentimes, as a beginner, you will be hit so early in your chases that you're not going to be able to use this well. Now, for advanced players that can keep themselves healthy for a long time, and against killers that are paying a lot of attention to noise, especially things like Spirit, this can actually be quite nasty. One of the craziest things you can do with this perk is blind a killer while they're breaking a pallet and then run right by them. Normally in this situation, the killer would be footsteps, footsteps, footsteps. I can't see anything. I'm blind. Footsteps, footsteps, and they wouldn't hear anything. It's a very sneaky perk that very rarely I notice in time. I always notice a bit too late when I've already been played. So that's quite nice. In my opinion, against a lot of killers that just track with their power or in different ways or with their perks, this could be a waste of time. If you play against a hack that is not even chasing you, you know, that's just setting up traps everywhere, or against a killer that has 5 auto-reading perks and is seeing you 24/7, knows where you live, like not making footsteps noise is just completely irrelevant. So I don't think it's incredible for intermediate or beginner players, but I think advanced players can actually use it quite well. And it's a fun perk because it encourages you to get really close to the killer. And much like Iron Will when you're injured, this perk allows you to run next to a killer, maybe around a wall, and they will not realize. If you use a bit of unique pathing, right? You, for example, turn around and run back across the wall. That would be a really bad idea because the killer would hear you immediately. But it would be a really good idea with light-footed because they won't. Just keep in mind that even though you don't make footstep sounds, you still make breathing sounds. So a killer that's paying a little bit of attention will still hear your character go, you know, the normal panting noises they make. So if you want to be extra good with this perk, don't play a character like Feng Bin that makes a lot of, you know, loud panting noises. Play a quieter character and you'll benefit from it more. Urban Evasion is another very accessible perk that people unlock quite often. It allows you to crouch at the same speed that you walk, which makes it really comfortable to move around the map crouching sometimes. It is a bit of a noob trap. Some people feel like if they're crouching, they are invisible. And at the lower levels, you often see a survivor crouch and just walk around the map like this. Like, even though the killer is nowhere near, right? It is, if you use it like that, if you use it to just feel safe and hide at times when you really don't have to, it will be a waste of your own time and not a great idea. However, Urban Evasion is still really good for other reasons. Against many killers that can damage you over small obstacles, Urban Evasion is great. So for example, if you're playing against a Huntress and she's holding her hatchet, you need to crouch. But then she walks around you and she hits you. With this, you can crouch and still move very fast. This can deny Myers, Ghostface, Trickster, Huntress, Slinger, any range or staring, stalking killer, the ability to see you and thus damage you at low loops. And it can also help a lot against Hag or Pyramid Head, since you can crouch through their traps or their trails without setting them off. So that can be quite nice. Otherwise, not super good. Potential Energy is an incredibly sad perk. The long story short is that this perk gives you a little backpack. when you're working on a generator, instead of working on the generator, you can start to put progress onto your backpack. And then you can carry it and put it on another generator. This can occasionally be really useful. If a generator is at 90% in the middle of the map and it's very contested by the killer, you can work on a gen that's very safe. When it's about done, start putting it into your backpack, and then bring it to that generator and bam, immediately complete it. That's pretty good. It's not extremely efficient because you lose a bit of progress, but it's pretty good. However, the sad part about this perk, if you run perks like Déjà Vu and you work as a team with coordinated teammates, you don't need it. You will simply do the right gens at the right time, and this perk will be redundant. And if you play solo, you can never assume that your teammates will know what the hell you're doing. So basically, this perk is not useful enough for Survivor fans, and it's not easy enough to use for solo players. For that reason, I don't super recommend that you use it. If you go down, you also lose all the progress. If you leave a gen 99, sometimes you will get hit by pain rest, then deadlock, then this, then that, and the gen will never get down. So it could also be a mistake that could backfire. So yeah, careful. Rookie Spirit, super simple perk. You hit a few skill checks and it activates. Anytime a generator is regressing, either because of ruin, pain rest, a generator being kicked by the killer himself, you will see the aura of that generator. This is completely useless in... You could just run alert and you would know when a generator is being kicked, and it's simpler and it works in chase as well. You could also just listen to your teammates or have a bit of awareness. It's not great. It's just not good. I would say, though, in a few scenarios, Rookie Spirit can be quite good because it can show you where a gen is that you are not 100% sure of the actual location of. Say, for example, right? You see on the HUD that your teammate Dwight is working on a gen that's like 90%, and then Dwight goes down, but you're not 100% sure where he was working on that gen. But then you see the gen now gets kicked and it's white, and you go and touch it, and now you have a bit of awareness of the map. Still, if you have Déjà Vu, you would probably just be better off. This perk, if it had some kind of secondary effect, maybe that would be a little bit better, but yeah, it's just a very, very small effect by itself. Hard Dent. This perk actually has a cute effect. Anytime you would scream, you instead reveal the aura of the killer and turn it into a wall hack. If this happens against a doctor or against a clown that makes you scream, or some other killer perks or abilities that make you scream, you could actually turn a lot of things around. Say, for example, the killer has Iron Maiden, you come out of a locker, you actually see the killer and don't scream. And it makes it a little bit stealthy as well. You make the doctor, it's like a calm spirit of sort, if you know what that perk does. The problem with Harden is that it's actually so difficult to get it up. There are not many games where you have the luxury of doing one totem and one chest. By the time you do that, your teammate's already dead and buried. It's such a waste of time to do one chest and one totem. I also have explained that if you do decide to cleanse a totem, there's a chance that the killer will have a perk called Pentimento that can revive that totem and make everyone slow. And if it's not a killer like Doctor, the times you'll scream is not that useful. Yeah, you will scream whenever you get hit, but then you need to heal. It's just so... I love this perk. I actually love the idea of this perk. I love perks that encourage you to do side objectives, but the cold hard fact is that it takes too much work and the reward is simply not enough. Plunderer, very accessible, very simple perk, shows you the aura of chests. It also gives them a better chance to give you a strong item. This can give you a good key to open the hatch in case your teams die, or a nice toolbox, or a nice map to find other things, or also nothing. It can just give you a worthless brown toolbox, and it will. One of the nice things about Plunderers is that it shows you where all of the chests are, and this can let you know where basement is in case you want to stay away from it or find it for whatever other reason. So that's nice. Overall, I don't think it's worth it. You know, the best way to get a guaranteed good item, bring it from home into the trial. You know, unfortunately, plundering builds are just not that great. Residual Manifest, honestly, a bit of a bane of a perk for newer killers. If you blind the killer with this perk, either with a flashlight or with blast mine, you could still do that. They will not see autos of gens for 30 seconds, and that can be so confusing. And it will also rob them of any auto reading perks they had or powers. So that's nice. They will still see white power auras those are always visible. But it also encourages you to search chests because it gives you a guaranteed yellow flashlight, which can be useful if you need one in the endgame and time's on your side. Overall, though, against experienced killer, making them blind is just like, they don't care. They know where the gens are. They're paying attention, so it's not that good. Collective Stealth. Whenever you heal another survivor, you both leave no scratch marks for a little while as long as you are close, and if not, it lasts for a little bit longer. times you will heal other people, and there will be times when you don't want to leave scratch marks, but in almost every situation where you heal someone else, the killer is either completely far away or the killer is out of the coming because they know that you're under a hook. Like, there are so few scenarios where you're going to heal a survivor and you're going to be allowed to finish the heal, and you will definitely want to have no scratch marks. It's just a really, really rare scenario. Very gimmicky, no real hard effect to discourage a killer from catching you or make it harder for them to catch you. Dance With Me. This perk has a shorter cooldown now, which is nice. Anytime you vault a window or even come out of a locker quick, you leave no scratch marks. Honestly, the locker part is quite nice. You can come out of a locker with Headon and then leave no scratch marks after stunning the killer. You could also run other perks that do the same thing, like Parental Guidance, which are just better. But yeah, I think this perk is actually quite gimmicky and not all that good. It's a common perk for people to run because you will often buy Kate for Windows of Opportunity, but it's just not that good. If I notice that whenever someone vaults in front of me, I will always pay attention to the scratch marks for the few seconds after and rule out this perk or realize that it's there. And many times when you vault, even if you have Lithe, the direction that you're going to is so predictable. The 3-second duration is so small, and you still leave blood if you're injured. That's just not that crazy good. Deception. You can run into a locker, and if you're running, you have the option to like fake a locker. Basically, the locker flaps open, makes a noise as if you had gotten in, and if the killer is nearby, it looks like someone got into the locker. Now, I have to say, 90% of the time, whenever someone uses this perk, it's really, really obvious. Survivors don't go into lockers for no reason, so the killer will probably figure out that you have it. So this perk is not super sneaky, right? The killer will often know that you have it when you trigger it. Now, the key is to still make it difficult for the killer to follow you, even if they know that you have it. So one thing that you can do, right? Keep in mind that this perk prevents you from entering a locker quickly. So if you ever have to enter a locker quickly to like avoid a chainsaw or something, this could actually hurt you because you cannot do it if you're moving, right? So watch out, don't fall for that. But the nice thing about this perk, right, is that even if you're injured, you leave no pools of blood. If you have, for example, the idea that an Oni is coming at your gen, you can go to a locker, maybe have Spring Burst ready, and then open the locker and then run in some random direction. The killer will show up. They will probably understand that you've used Deception. They might even check the locker thinking, okay, this guy's stupid, but they won't have a path to follow. So that can be okay. That can be an all right, but I don't think it's super good. Okay, Bite the Bullet is a really fun perk. Whenever you heal other people, you don't make any noise and they don't make any noise. And the same thing happens if you heal yourself. If you miss a skill check, you also don't alert the killer and it's not as punishing. You shouldn't miss skill checks healing, but I mean, it can happen, so that's nice. Now, this perk is really, really fun because you can sometimes go around the corner, begin to heal in a bush, and the killer will go through you and be like, huh, where did the survivor go? So it can lead to some really funny scenarios. Most of the times when you're healing another survivor, the killer will be able to figure out where you are. So the stealth part of this is not that amazing. The other survivor might also have Off the Record, which, as we explained earlier, is a really strong perk. So it's really not that big of a deal. So for the most part, this perk is just very gimmicky. Not to mention that if you don't have Distortion, there is a chance the killer sees your aura. It's extremely sad whenever a survivor tries to use this perk and I just see them anyway. There's also been many times when I find a survivor healing around the corner, and I have to say, it's a little bit obvious sometimes. It's really, really risky. Use this perk because it's fun, but it's not very good. Sim Partner. It allows you to see the killer aura whenever you lock eyes with them from a bit of a distance, and you scream. You can sometimes scream multiple times in a row as well. And this has a bit of a cooldown. Seeing the killer aura is nice, especially with Spring Burst. It allows you to immediately see what approach they might have. But it also is very gimmicky and can throw you off and doesn't have any insane synergies. Sure, you could run it with Headon to see the killer for longer and not scream. It's just not worth it. Also, if you run Calm Spirit to prevent the scream, the perk doesn't work, so don't even think about that. It's just not that good. The perk seems a bit silly, and it is in fact a bit silly. Better Than New. You heal another survivor and they have a buff to their own healing speed, their own cleansing, and basically the nicest thing about this perk is that if you heal someone else, they can now heal you a bit faster. But if you want to do that, just run Solidarity. Solidarity is 70% progress. This is 18%. That's pathetic. This perk It just has awful numbers. And many times when you heal another survivor, you will be healthy yourself. And them healing someone else is just, it just sucks. It just sucks. It's not very good. Like, I mean, yeah, you could heal someone, but if you're, like, it only triggers when they're already fully healed. So the numbers on this perk, like the effect is mediocre and the numbers are just terrible. Autodidact. This perk at its best can actually be really, really, really strong. Basically, whenever you heal someone without a medkit, you don't get normal skill checks. Instead, you grant special skill checks. At the beginning, you heal... each skill check doesn't do very much. In fact, it even takes away progress. But as you hit 5 skill checks, they get better and better and better and better to the point where after hitting 2 skill checks, you can fully heal someone. Let me just say, at its strongest, this perk can be wildly, wildly amazing, right? You can go to a person... sorry about that. You can go to a person that is on the hook, get them off and heal them in just a few seconds. You can go to a person that's on the ground, hit a skill check, and they're up in seconds. But guess what? It's very RNG. You might not get skill checks. They might not want to cooperate. The killer might come back. And if your first heal is slower, that could really hurt you. You might get tunneled and not really get a chance to hook anyone. And let's be honest, if you want to heal faster after on hook, Will Make It is better. If you want to heal better off the ground, We're Gonna Live Forever is better. If you want the person to heal themselves immediately, Resurgence is amazing. I'll tell you that, if you go against a Plague, GG, well played, good luck in the next game. It's just not super, super good. Very inconsistent. Another inconsistent, but also quite fun perk is Mirror Illusion. You do a bit of a gen, and then you have the ability to put a fake version of yourself on a generator, a chest, or an execute, which is really funny. This rarely works. Whenever the killer gets close, they see that the illusion is like a little hologram. But from afar, it does look pretty convincing. The best thing that you can do with this is honestly just be on a gen, right? Put the illusion of yourself next to you, and then work on another side. And if you're playing against a Huntress or a Nurse or some killer that attacks, they are guaranteed going to throw a hatchet at that and miss it, thinking that it's a real character. It can be fun. And also against killers that have never seen this perk, it is absolutely hilarious. Fast track. Anytime your teammates get hooked, you get 3 tokens up to a maximum of whatever. And 3 tokens basically means you save, I don't know, about 3% of a gen, which is like what, 2.4 seconds or something like that, or 2.7 seconds, whatever. You save about 3 seconds every time you hit a great skill check and your teammates get hooked. This is awful. This is awful. I used to think this perk was kind of cool. It also does a little dong sound, which is very satisfying. Best thing about the perk. But if you run Déjà Vu, that's way better. If you run any healing, any repairing speed perk, that's way better. One thing that Fast Track is going to do for you, which is going to destroy your matches, is to encourage you to be passive, right? Your teammate gets hooked, and you're like, oh, I got 1 fast track. Your teammate gets hooked. Oh, okay, he's getting tunnel, but I got another fast track. Someone else is getting hooked, and you're like, oh, that's so good. More fast track. Wow, I'm doing a gen so fast. And then by the time you do 1 gen, your entire team is in shambles, dead and buried, and you have nothing. You know, much, much better to have other more active perks, and much, much better to sometimes leave the bloody gen and actually take hits, or take the chase, or encourage the killer to hook multiple people so that no one dies so quickly. Ace in the hole. This perk allows you to carry an item at the end of the game and keep the add-ons. If you're a beginner and you love hoarding add-ons, that perk's great. It also allows you to open a chest and guarantee 1 add-on, sometimes 2 add-ons, depending on your luck. The add-ons can be quite good. You can sometimes get like styptics or some nice duration add-ons or whatever, but yeah, it's very, very random, and looking for chests is ultimately not a great idea. The best way to get a nice item, as I said earlier, is to bring one from home. Technician. It makes you not blow up the gen and give a notification to the killer. It comes from Fang Min, which is a character that you're probably going to play for Lithe and Alert, and it's a nice perk for beginners that are still a little bit nervous about hitting skill checks. Yes, when you hit a skill check, there is a bit more of a penalty, but the generator can be worked on faster, so this penalty is not as big as it seems. It's honestly, you forget about the penalty, it's not even that big of a deal. Now, one thing that people often forget about this perk is that it has a secondary effect. Whenever you work on the generator, the killer does not hear the actual clicky, clicky, clicky repair sounds. So sometimes you can be on a generator, leave it, and even if the killer was very near, they might not realize that there's a survivor right there that was working on that gen. You know, so for example, if you're in a main building working on a generator and the killer is right below you, like a few meters below you to the side, they will not realize that they might hear the gen, They might hear the repair, but they might not realize that there is a survivor actively repairing that gen. That is a nice effect. Repress Alliance. After working on a gen for a little while, it activates and it gives you the ability to block a gen with the entity so that the gen cannot take any damage. Neither you nor the killer can damage it. Now, in some scenarios, this can be really good. If you have a gen that's 99%, you can block the gen and then avoid a pain res or a pop or some other nasty perk from the killer, right? This can be okay, but let's get back to that scenario, right? Let's say that the killer ignores that 99% gen for 30 seconds and then goes and tunnels a survivor. What the hell do you do? This perk, even though it can be really good, it can also backfire. Sometimes a generator that is nearly done, if the killer ignores it, you actually want to get back on it and do it as soon as possible. So this perk can actually block your own progress. And as a result, I think figuring out the perfect way to use it is actually fairly difficult. Calm Spirit prevents you from screaming, which is nice against killers like Doctor, Clown, and a few other select perks here and there, and doesn't disturb crows. That part is actually quite good. Especially the shadows can sometimes give you away, and even normal crow flying off often makes me find survivors. So Calm Spirit is nice. However, it's very obvious that you have it. It's very pointless for the most part, and it has a downside of making you do chess, but more importantly, totems 30% slower. That is awful. That is awful. If you have a Pentimental Ruin build and you have to cleanse totems because your teammates are terrible and the killer has Thrill the Hunt or some other thing that slows you down like Thana, doing a totem like 50% slower is so horrible when they all stack together. You do not want to run this perk. Appraisal used to be possibly one of the worst, most useless perks in the entire game. It allowed you to open a chest, and then once it's open, you could rummage, aka search it a second time to get a random item. This random item could be good, but more often than not, it's not worth the time. Even though it makes you search it faster, it's garbage. And it has a limit, so you can only do it 3 times, which is fine, because normally there's only 3 chests, but yeah, I'm sorry, it just blows. It's terrible. However, since searching chests counts for the perks Specialist and for the perks Moment of Glory, Appraisal can be used with Specialist and Moment of Glory for a little bit of value. And that makes it a bit less terrible. But overall, even if you have a plundering build, it's just not that good. Next up is Specialist. This perk, under most circumstances, is horrible, horrible, horrible. Basically, anytime you open a chest, you get a token, and if you hit a great skill check, the generator will permanently lose 6% or 6 charges, a bit more than 6%, 6 out of 90 charges permanently. Now, losing charges permanently is pretty nice. It means that damage, that progress is completely unremovable. Even if the killer kicks it, even if the killer has all these perks, they won't be able to undo that damage. That's pretty nice, especially in long, drawn-out games. That can be quite nice. And you can also accumulate a few charges and do them all at once or little by little, right? Now, the problem, if you do the math, it takes you 6 seconds to do 6 charges, and it takes you about 12 seconds to do a chess, or maybe a bit less depending, but let's just round it to 12 seconds, not including the time it takes you to go and find it. So gating 6 seconds on a gen for 12 seconds of a chess is terrible. However, if you have a build with Appraisal, with maybe Pharmacy as well, and you search a chest fast and rummage through a chest fast, and then rack up 3 or 4 Specialist tokens, doing 24% of a gen, 24 charges of a gen is actually pretty nasty. In those builds, this can actually be quite okay, and I do have a build with Appraisal that shows you a little bit how it can be done if you want to look that video up. Still, for the most part, super unworth it. Please don't run it, and not very good. This is now happening is a very simple perk. Whenever you're injured, skill checks are bigger. This is absolute garbage. It does make you more likely to heal faster and do gens faster. Resilience would be just way better, and it's not, it's not subject to the randomness, the RNG of skill checks. It's completely 9% consistency, right? However, I have to say this is not happening is maybe okay for beginners. If you have nothing else, absolutely nothing else. And it's also okay with hyper focus if you want to make the skill check a little bit bigger, which can make it a bit more consistent. Even then, awful perk. Counterforce. Terrible perk. It shows you the aura of the furthest totem when you cleanse 1 totem. So basically, if you follow the totems that this perk shows you, you will constantly be going back and forth on the map and be very inconsistent. It's actually much better to run this perk with a map to actually find totems quickly. And Counterforce, it stacks with itself. So the first time you do a totem, it will be fast. And this perk, if you are a bit lucky, can actually power through Pentimento. So say, for example, that you cleanse 2 totems and that the killer applies 2 Pentimentos, and then you cleanse the 2 Pentimentos, you now do totems twice as fast. Because you've done, you have 20% and you've done 20, 20, 20, 20, 4 times, right? So you now do totems really fast. If you do enough totems, you can actually start cleansing totems in like 4 seconds, which is crazy. So this perk can actually be okay. But why do you want to cleanse totems? Why? Like most of the times the killer doesn't have any totem perks. And if you have totem perks, it's better to bring a perk to actually find them. It's just not very good. Very, very awkward in the meta right now. Even though I personally really like that perk. Low profile triggers when you are the last survivor standing. Either everyone else being dead, on the hook, or dying, This can be okay. 90 seconds is a very long duration, but let me just be honest. Whenever you're the last survivor, not leaving scratch marks is just pointless. Either the killer knows where you are and you're going to die, or they don't and you're fine. There's very few moments where you're the last survivor and you're running around and you don't want to leave pools of blood. Either you are in trouble or you are fine. Very few in between. So this perk is beyond situational. Spine Chill. Oh, by the way, we skipped a few. Yeah, we're now on the really worst perks out there. Spine Chill. Whenever the killer is looking at you with a direct line of sight, you do things a little bit faster. Things other than vaulting and other than, anything you would actually want. It's very, very little. Yeah, I can show you that a killer is looking at you, but you can also use your eyes. This perk actually used to be very good because it made you vault faster and it walked through walls, but now it doesn't. They also remove a little side effect that it had. This perk is now a shadow of its former self. It's as useless as the description suggests. Now, I have to say, in a few situations, when a killer is running right at you and you're opening a gate last second or healing a survivor last second or unhooking last second, that 6% can sometimes be okay, but 6% is not a big deal. I'm sorry. Premonition, it shows, it plays a little sound effect whenever the killer is whenever your camera is faced towards the killer, and it does work through walls and it has a big cooldown. Honestly, even if you are playing against a stealth killer, I'm sorry, it's so useless. It's so much better to have other auto-reading perks that are 10 times stronger and actually give you a good indication of where the killer is and don't have a 30-second cooldown. It's almost insultingly bad. Sorry, guys. Cut Loose, an interesting perk that is ultimately cut out of being useful by its own cooldown. So basically the idea with Cut Loose is that it's like a quick and quiet that works the second time you use it. So if you are in chase and you vault a window, for example, you can then have a small period of time where if you vault back, the second vault will be quiet. That is actually awesome. If the perk only did that, that would be awesome. Right? Because you could vault a window, the killer goes around, and then you vault it back, and because they don't hear it, they don't react to it, so you get more distance. It could actually be really, really, really good. However, you could also vault into if it worked when you vault a window into a locker, that could be interesting as well. But the problem is that it actually triggers even if you don't use it. So in your first chase, if you vault a window and then don't vault back, it doesn't matter. The perk still goes on cooldown just as if you had done it. And that just makes it extremely awkward. And it goes from a utility, stealth perk to a never useful, extremely risky, do this and it might backfire. And sometimes it's on cooldown when you need it. Terrible perk. Diversion, aka the Pebble. You charge it up by being in the killer's terror radius, which is already hard against some killers that don't have one. And then you can throw a little pebble. It makes a noise, and it leaves a few scratch marks on the area. Now, some people are a little bit confused, right? And they don't realize that this perk literally goes 20 meters in front of you and explodes. I've seen survivors go on a building and then use diversion. And then I see an explosion happen in the middle of the air where literally a survivor can never be. So if you do that, I know exactly where you are. I have actually found so many survivors by reverse engineering where diversion is. Yes, a really smart survivor should be able to use diversion to make you think that a gen has exploded or something. But in reality, almost every time diversion is used, I either ignore it, don't fall for it, or worse, I actually find a survivor by looking at 20 meters away from that point and find them right away. So it's actually really, really bad. Red herring, really, really sad perk. You work on a generator for a little bit. The perk lets you know that it's working by highlighting the generator. And then if you go into a locker, that generator explodes in the eyes of the killer. So the idea, right, with this perk is that you go to some generator that no one's doing, then you go into a locker, and then the killer shows up there and they're like, whoa, what's going on? That is never going to happen. Killers have so much information with their powers on their perks. If they go to a generator, it's because they know it's being done. They're already changed to someone else. They're never going to go to a generator with no expectation whatsoever. Very, very rarely. Even in the end game, if this happens super like on the last gen, I probably would still be suspicious, right? And the worst part is that you can screw your team over. Say that you have a generator that has a little bit of progress and you apply blast mine or something, right? And then you want to bait the killer. You go into a locker, you waste a lot of time doing so. And then the killer shows up. And then your teammate found the gen, so they are there, and then he chases your teammate, and then he downs them, and then surge happens, and the gen takes damage, and then the teammate gets hooked next to the gen, and now you lost the game. It's supposed to be a fun little diversion type of perk, but if it was changed to be a bit faster, like for example, if this perk made the skill check that you missed happen on a completely different gen, that would be really good, because it would allow you to be efficient and distract the killer. But this perk requires you to waste your own time, requires you to make a leap of faith that your teammates will not be screwed over, but that the killer will actually pay attention to it, and it's just awful. And it has a cooldown. Terrible. Friendly competition. You finish a generator with someone else, and both you and that person do gens faster for a little bit. If they finish a generator with you. Sometimes they might not. Sometimes they might leave a second earlier and then this perk does nothing. 5% faster gens. I do believe that honestly every percent matters, but this is one of the worst effects in the entire game. Déjà Vu is 5% consistently. This is 5% sometimes. It's just so bad. Compared to Proof Thyself, it's so bad. It's just so terrible. First of all, it's best for survivors to split up on different gens. So ideally, this perk should not even work. And with solo players, it's not good. And with team on Discord or communication, you have so many better perks. It's just terrible. The effect itself is just tiny. Dark Theory. You set a boon, and in that area, survivors are 2% faster. Now, any percent that makes you faster is honestly quite significant, especially when it gets to 4 or 5%. It gets really noticeable, right? Hope is 7%. It's very noticeable. But the thing about Dark Theory is that it is a walking contradiction. If you have a boon with other boons, you typically want the killer... you want to take advantage of it whether the killer is there or not. So if you have a healing boon, the killer, if it's not there, perfect. You can use it to heal. And if the killer's there, at least you see the aura of each of people, so you can maybe go for a hit or whatever. But this requires you to set it up somewhere where the killer will chase, but also somewhere where the 2% will matter. But also, like compared to just not running any perk, this is just maybe a side grade. Honestly, in the time that it takes you to find that totem and set this up, you would be so much better off doing anything else, literally anything else. The 2% haste effect is incredibly minor. It's very limited. It doesn't linger for very long. It's just too little of a fun effect. It's not a terrible effect, but it's just too little of an effect. Next up is Deadline. Deadline is an interesting perk, but it's not necessarily terrible. But it just has a lot of downsides, okay? So basically, the nicest thing that this perk will do right off the bat is that anytime you miss a skill check, the downside of the skill check will be 50% less. So normally when you miss a skill check on a generator, you will lose 10%. With this perk, you will lose 5%. That's pretty good. If you miss a skill check healing, normally I think it would be 10%. Now it will be only 5%. That's pretty good. However, the problem is that you're going to be missing skill checks a lot more because this perk makes the skill checks appear in random locations, and it only works when you're injured. This perk can actually screw you over in so many ways. If you play against a killer that is not a doctor, that is running the perk Merciless Storm becomes really difficult with Deadline if you're injured. So you can make a perk that is very easy to deal with into a perk that's very difficult to deal with. If you're touching a gen and the killer has overcharge, it can be really difficult as well, right? So this is all really, really awkward. It's supposed to give you more risk and more reward because it gives you more skill checks. If you try to do this with hyper focus, you might think that that's a good idea, but hitting the skill checks with this is impossibly difficult unless you're a machine. So the only usable combination for Deadline, is Autodidact. Autodidact, the main downside is that you don't get skill checks often enough. So if you're injured and you have Deadline and you have Autodidact, you can guarantee that you will get more skill checks on Autodidact. And because the skill checks on Autodidact are so easy, Deadline doesn't really matter that they're a bit random. However, that requires a lot of RNG. You need to have Autodidact, you need to be injured. It's generally not worth it even in that situation. Invocation Weaving Spiders is an interesting perk. You send one person to the basement and that person can spend 1 whole minute to basically make themselves permanently injured for the rest of the game. That is a bad thing. That is a terrible thing. But in exchange, every generator available will lose a 10 charge shaved off its maximum progress permanently. 10 charges is a little bit more than 10%. Every generator has 90 charges. So basically, if in a best case scenario, you can use this to take a few generators and make them lose a significant amount. This can be okay sometimes, but the risk overall is awful, and doing it at the start of the game is super, super risky. Now, as a general rule, I say don't ever run this perk. There's just way better alternatives. But if we want to get a little bit creative, there are a few ways in which this perk can actually be usable. One of the nice things about this perk is that the person that starts it doesn't need to be the one that finishes it. So you can start the invocation, then leave the basement, and someone else can finish it, right? You can actually use this. You can actually use it to somehow bring the survivor back to life. So when this perk activates, the person becomes injured and broken. And that means that if they're on the ground, they'll actually get picked up. So one thing that you could do is have this perk ready, have the person that initiated go down, and then they can be picked up. But all of this is just like for a perk slot and for 60 seconds of progress, which can be made faster. There's multiple survivors. It's just not worth it. It's overall not worth it. Next up, we have No Mither. No Mither makes you injured permanently, which is awful, awful, awful. But you are less loud, you leave no blood, and you can pick yourself up indefinitely a bit faster than normal. This last part is actually quite good. In some tournaments, believe it or not, some people run No Mither to make themselves basically unkillable. They just go down on a pallet with their teammate ready. And it's like a free Unbreakable forever. But those are tournaments where some other perks are banned, so No Mither is maybe okay, and they were going against an insta-down killer anyway, but nah. Let me just be real with you. Unless you're doing some memes, or you are aware of the risk, this perk is overall a massive downside, not to mention that if you play against a killer that has Thanatophobia, you're giving them free slowdown the whole game. If you play against a killer like Oni, you're giving them free blood all game around. So yeah, No Mither is a bit of a meme, which you probably already knew. And hopefully with that, you have a greater understanding of survivor perks. No doubt, I have missed a few details here and there. So if you are aware of any or something that just changed by the time you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment to help other people that are learning understand this game better. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for the killer version of this tier list. Thank you so much for watching. Say that. Bye-bye. See ya.